In the middle of the night, a light still glowing in one of the building's windows shows that someone is wide awake. At 3 in the morning, the young man is still glued to his computer, focused on gaming in the darkness of his room. He can hardly believe there are still opponents willing to fight this late at night. On the screen, his level 98 opponent rages after being attacked and having his belongings stolen. The player Yi Xuan keeps hammering the buttons to secure the victory, reach the maximum level, and claim the $1 million prize. With one quick and precise move, he unleashes his ultimate attack and hits the target head-on. Yi Xuan celebrates in his chair after finally defeating his opponents. When the option to devour the items appears on the screen, he already starts celebrating the fortune he is about to receive. Without wasting any time, he clicks to absorb all the resources and claim the reward. But the moment he confirms the action, an overwhelmingly bright light begins pouring out of the screen. The flash fills the entire room and completely engulfs Yi Xuan. Startled, he can barely keep his eyes open against the unexpected light. With no idea what is happening, Yi Xuan screams as the mysterious force surrounds his body. Suddenly, a massive beam of light shoots from the top of the building into the sky. Somewhere else, heavy rain falls beneath the light of a full moon. The scene shifts to the imposing Yi family mansion surrounded by the storm. From above, a glowing spiritual figure desperately plummets toward the rooftop. Floating in that bluish form, Yi Xuan is stunned, unsure whether he is dead or somehow still alive. Before he can understand anything, he is pulled downward at incredible speed. His spirit crashes into the courtyard and lets out a groan from the impact. As he gets up, he realizes the fall caused no pain at all to his energy-based body. At that moment, a dark attack slices through the air and passes straight through his transparent form without harming him. Startled, Yi Xuan looks behind him, unable to understand how the attack simply passed through his body. Judging by the man's clothing and energy, he quickly realizes that he is a masked assassin. Then a calm but firm voice rings out, questioning the intruder's audacity. The man condemns the assassins for invading the Yi family mansion in the middle of the night, while Yi Xuan's spirit wonders if they are talking to him. When he takes a closer look at the person who just appeared, Yi Xuan is stunned. Standing before the intruders is a young cultivator identical to him, who coldly tells them their bad luck was crossing his path. The assassin says the boy's attitude is irritating, but celebrates finally drawing him out of hiding. When no one reacts to his waving, Yi Xuan concludes that the people there simply cannot see him. The enemy mocks the boy for falling so easily into the trap, and Yi Xuan discovers that this cultivator is also named Yi Xuan. Completely unfazed, the Yi Xuan from this world recognizes his opponent as Chen Song and taunts him about the beating he gave him in the past. Annoyed, Chen Song claims he only lost because he was careless and reveals that this time he brought his older brother Chen Feng. Surrounded by crackling electricity, Chen Feng steps forward and promises to teach the young man an unforgettable lesson. A massive explosion of energy fills the courtyard beneath the storm, marking the beginning of the battle. Chen Feng attacks from above and orders his brother to seal off the area, but Yi Xuan responds with a fourth-order martial art. The young man charges forward and unleashes the full power of the Yi family's fist technique against his opponent. Hiding behind a pillar, Yi Xuan's spirit watches the battle in fascination and regrets not transmigrating into a physical body so he could cultivate too. On the other side, Chen Song watches the fight with hatred, desperately rooting against his rival. To his surprise, even while facing someone one stage above him, Yi Xuan manages to fight evenly and hold his ground. Chen Song realizes he cannot allow him to leave alive because if Yi Xuan reaches his full potential, the Chen family will lose its position in Lin Yun. With a malicious smile, he decides to strike from the shadows and finish the young man once and for all. Holding a dagger, Chen Song blames Yi Xuan himself for being too talented and threatening his peace of mind. On the ground, Yi Xuan's soul notices the suspicious movement and starts paying close attention. While the cultivator trades blows and taunts Chen Feng, Chen Song takes advantage of the opening to attack from behind. When Yi Xuan's soul notices the sneak attack, he panics and tries to warn him. But it is already too late, and the cultivator senses the approaching attack at the last possible moment. The dagger pierces Yi Xuan's chest before he can defend himself. Even Chen Feng is surprised to see his brother resort to such a cowardly attack. Chen Song, on the other hand, celebrates after successfully landing the fatal blow. Stabbed from behind, Yi Xuan coughs up blood, condemns Chen Song's despicable actions, and collapses. While the enemies mock the fallen genius, Yi Xuan's soul is stunned to see him die from a simple low-ranked dagger. Chen Feng checks his pulse, confirms that his heart has stopped, and decides their mission is complete. With their objective accomplished, the two immediately decide to retreat before they are discovered. The intruders disappear into the darkness, leaving only Yi Xuan's soul and the corpse behind in the courtyard. He approaches the body, confused because he does not see the young man's soul leaving it like his own did. Yi Xuan begins wondering whether he is the only spirit there, and whether everything happened specifically to bring him to this body. Feeling sorry for the young man who fought both enemies head-on, he thinks that in his game, he would have handled the situation far more strategically. Seeing that the young man died with his eyes open, Yi Xuan reaches out to close his eyelids. As he touches his face, he hopes the young man will be smarter in his next life. But at that exact moment, an intense golden light begins radiating from the body. A tremendous force pulls Ye Xuan's spirit into the course before he can react. He screams desperately as his soul completely merges with the dead young man's body. The storm passes and a peaceful morning arrives as birds fly between the trees in the garden. Outside the mansion, a worried female voice calls out for the young master. With his vision still dark and his head spinning, Ye Xuan slowly begins regaining consciousness. He tries to figure out where the gentle voice is coming from as his blurry vision starts focusing on the girl in front of him. The maid Lu celebrates in relief when she sees that her young master has finally woken up. Ye Xuan pats the girl on the head to calm her down and assures her that everything is fine. Soon afterward, however, he finds it strange that he already knows the maid's name and position despite never seeing her before. To confirm his suspicion, he asks Li to bring him a mirror immediately. When Ye Xuan sees his reflection, he confirms in shock that he has reincarnated into the body of the murdered cultivator. He remembers hearing the assassins say that the previous owner of this body was the greatest genius in Li and Yun. The thought of taking over the body of the city's #1 genius immediately brings an ambitious smile to his face. Promising to avenge the young man's death, Ye Xuan decides to use this new chance to become the strongest person in this world. Excited to start cultivating, he tries circulating Cli through his dantian, copying what he remembers seeing in television shows. But the moment he forces the energy through his body, he coughs up blood and falls to his knees. Coughing on the floor, he desperately asks Li what is wrong with his body. With tears in her eyes, the maid reveals that his dantian was completely destroyed and all his cultivation was lost. Ye Xuan is devastated when he realizes his dream of becoming a supreme master ended before it even began. Worried, Li asks him to calm down and reveals that there is still a way to restore his destroyed dantian. She says she heard about 100-year-old black blood ginseng stored in the family treasury that can restore his martial power. After hearing about the rare medicine, Ye Xuan finally sees a chance to recover his strength. Excited, he grabs Lu by the arms and asks her to take him to the treasury immediately. Accompanied by the girl, he crosses the mansion courtyards toward the treasury building. Along the way, the other servants begin noticing Ye Xuan's pale and weakened condition. Two maids whisper to each other, surprised by the sickly appearance of the family's main young master. One of them explains that he was attacked and lost all his cultivation, leaving the other shocked to learn that the former genius is now crippled. The two lament what happened, remembering that the young man always treated the servants fairly and kindly. Soon afterward, Li points ahead and says they have finally reached the family treasury. Ye Xuan stares at the building, determined to obtain the item he needs. In front of the imposing structure, a fat steward and two armed guards block the bridge leading inside. The steward relaxes with his fan while the guards watch over the entrance. When Ye Xuan and Li try to approach, the two guards cross their spears and order them to stop. Angered by their rudeness, Li demands that the third steward open his eyes and recognize young master Ye Xuan. The steward slowly raises his fan and lets out a disdainful sigh. Pretending to be respectful, he apologizes for failing to recognize him and asks what Ye Xuan came there for. With no patience for games, Ye Xuan says he came to retrieve the 100-year-old black blood ginseng. Mockingly, the steward demands a written order bearing the patriarch's signature. Liu immediately argues back, reminding him that the young master never needed authorization to withdraw resources from the treasury before. The steward slams his hand on the table and cuts the maid off. He makes it clear that Ye Xuan is nothing more than a cripple now and no longer has the right to take medicine from the family. Furious over his ingratitude, Liu accuses the steward of taking advantage of the situation to humiliate someone who always treated him well. The man arrogantly replies that the only reason he has not ordered the guards to throw Ye Xuan out is out of respect for the past. According to him, the resources in the treasury belong to useful members of the clan and should not be wasted on someone useless. To make matters worse, he reveals that the elders are already planning to send Xuan to the countryside to manage the family businesses. After hearing the mocking advice to start packing his belongings, Ye Xuan grits his teeth and suppresses his anger. He experiences firsthand how cruel this world is. Yesterday's genius became disposable overnight. Since he cannot get anything there for now, he lets out a grunt and decides to leave. Ye Xuan tells Liu to forget about it and turns around, knowing that confronting them right now would accomplish nothing. The maid follows him and suggests speaking directly with the patriarch before believing only the steward's word. Behind them, the steward spits on the ground and mocks the young man for still acting like the city's great genius. On the way back, the maid Kai rushes toward them, calling out for the young master. She says the patriarch wants to see him in the main hall, and Liu immediately sees it as an opportunity to solve the situation. Sensing that something is wrong, Ye Xuan cautiously asks if she knows why he has been summoned. Kai hesitates, lowering her head with a sorrowful expression. With a trembling voice, she reveals that members of the Lin family have come to the mansion to cancel his engagement. The news leaves Li completely horrified. Ye Xuan receives the news calmly, realizing that the meeting might actually be a good opportunity to turn the situation around. Outraged, Liu points out that the Lin family was the one that requested the marriage with Lin Shuer, yet now they are rushing to cancel it the moment Ye Xuan falls from grace. When they reach the main hall, the tense atmosphere already shows how serious the meeting is. Inside, the clan elders and representatives of the Lin family wait in silence. Ye Xuan enters with Liu and respectfully greets the patriarch, addressing him as uncle. The patriarch acknowledges his arrival with a serious look and maintains his composure in front of the guests. He explains that he summoned Yi Xuan because the Lin family wishes to discuss the marriage agreement between him and Lin Xiur. Yi Xuan calmly interrupts him, saying he already knows they came to cancel the engagement because of his current condition. Without beating around the bush, he states that he lost all value in their eyes after his dantian was destroyed. Uncle Lin tries to explain himself, saying the decision did not originally come from him, but from a far greater power. According to him, an elder from the Tianyuan sect accepted Lin Xiur as her disciple and demanded the engagement be cancelled to protect the Yi family. Yi Xuan sarcastically mocks the excuse that they are doing this for his own good, just to make the humiliation sound more acceptable. The sect protector laughs mockingly and calls the young man ungrateful for rejecting their explanation. He warns that Lin Xiur has become the pride of the sect, and keeping a crippled fiancé would draw the anger of young talents toward the Yi family. Without being intimidated, Yi Xuan questions the man's arrogance and asks whether the sect stands above the laws of the Zhuanying Empire. The old man bursts into laughter at the young man's audacity in mentioning imperial law. He calls Yi Xuan ignorant and claims that even a mere protector like himself does not fear the authority of the empire. The elder raises his hand, surrounded by energy, making it clear just how insignificant that kingdom is compared to his sect. A crushing spiritual pressure fills the hall and frightens everyone present. Even the representative of the Lin family grows nervous before such a display of power. With his eyes glowing purple, the old man claims he would need only one finger to wipe the empire off the map. He then says he does not enjoy intimidating the weak and is still willing to settle everything through conversation. Seeing the cold sweat on the family elders, Yi Xuan realizes the man truly is not bluffing about his strength. The protector turns his attention back to him and demands a final decision. Uncle Lin intervenes and promises to return all the engagement gifts if Yi Xuan agrees to cancel the marriage. The mention of the gifts makes the young man's eyes light up as he remembers how valuable they were. He recalls that the dowry left behind by the previous owner's father was worth millions in resources. After doing the math, he concludes that if he can get 3 times that value, he will have enough money to buy elixirs and try to heal his dantian. Adopting an understanding attitude, Yi Xuan declares that he agrees to cancel the engagement. However, he adds one unexpected condition: he wants 3 times the value of the original dowry as compensation. The patriarch stands up in shock and tries to stop his nephew, believing the demand is absurd. Confidently, Yi Xuan tells his uncle not to worry and assures him that he knows what he is doing. Unable to argue against the young man's calm confidence, the patriarch eventually falls silent. Yi Xuan explains to the Lin family representative that accepting such humiliation without receiving anything in return would turn him into a laughingstock throughout the city. He also reminds him that both the Lin family and Tianyuan sect value their reputations, and such a stain would not be good for either of them. Understanding the blackmail, Uncle Lin grits his teeth in anger. Yi Xuan reinforces that the public would harshly criticize the Lin family for kicking a young man while he is already down. With a clever smile, he presents a solution that would preserve everyone's honor. He promises to publicly announce that he was the one who rejected the bride because he was crippled and did not want to hold her back as long as he receives triple compensation. Uncle Lin is left speechless by the young man's calculated proposal. Surprised by Yi Xuan's cleverness, the Tianyuan sect protector bursts into laughter and finds the idea interesting. Amused by the blackmail, the old man accepts the deal without hesitation. Uncle Lin panics and appeals to Senior Yu, saying the Lin family cannot gather 3 million right now. The protector, however, calmly says there is no reason to worry. He takes out a bottle containing 2 rare spirit condensation pills and claims each one is worth around 1.5 million. When he opens the container, a dense and mysterious fragrance spreads throughout the hall. Without hesitation, the old man tosses the bottle to Yi Xuan, providing the agreed compensation. Seeing how easily the elder gave up the pills, Yi Xuan regrets not asking for 5 times the amount. He turns to Li Yi and asks whether she has the original engagement contract with her. The maid takes out the document, saddened to see the agreement coming to an end. Suddenly, the contract catches fire and turns to ashes within seconds before her eyes. With the agreement terminated and the document destroyed, the representatives of the Lin family and the sect prepare to leave. Yi Xuan looks at the bottle in his hands for a moment and makes a decision. Before the protector can walk through the door, Yi Xuan calls him back. With a firm gaze, Yi Xuan asks for the elder's name. The old man chuckles and asks whether he wants to know so he can plan his revenge in the future. Pretending to be humble, Yi Xuan says he only wants to remember his name so he can learn from him someday, although he is secretly thinking about taking even more treasures from the man in the future. His response amuses the protector, who bursts into laughter. Impressed by the young man's courage, he introduces himself as Yu Jin, a protector of the Tianyuan sect. Yu Jin praises Yan's intelligence and laments his destroyed dantian, saying he would even accept him as a disciple if he were still able to cultivate. Yi Xuan remembers the protector's name as he watches the 2 leave, but when he tightens his grip around the bottle, a golden aura begins flowing from his hands. A shimmering screen appears before his eyes, announcing the activation of the supreme devouring system. The system detects the spirit condensation pills and asks whether he wants to devour them, leaving Yi Xuan stunned. He finally understands that this interface is the special ability he received after transmigrating. Excited, he celebrates after realizing that fate has not left him completely without hope. Then a stern voice cuts through his excitement and brings him back to reality. Yixuan snaps out of his daze and looks at the patriarch standing in front of him. The old man reprimands him for being distracted, and Yixuan politely asks what he wants. Regretfully, the patriarch reminds him that the family has already spent fortunes on treasures trying to heal him, but nothing worked. Since he believes Yixuan has no future left in martial arts, he suggests giving the pills to the clan's more promising young talents. Remaining calm, Yixuan immediately refuses and says he has another use for the pills. The patriarch grows angry and says it is delusional to believe 2 pills restores to his cultivation, otherwise Yujin himself would already have accepted him as a disciple. The other elders add pressure, saying that a medicine capable of healing a danchin costs far more and that keeping those pills will only put Yixuan in danger. Yixuan lets out a disdainful laugh and reminds them that none of those supposedly concerned elders said a word while the sect protector was humiliating their family. He exposes their hypocrisy. They only found the courage to pressure him after the real threat had already left. One of the elders loses his temper and calls him insolent for accusing them of greed. The man insists that giving the pills to the young talents is his duty if he wants to strengthen the clan. Unable to convince Yixuan, the elders appeal to the patriarch and demand that he imposes authority. Even while surrounded by pressure from the elders, Yixuan refuses to back down. The patriarch lets out a long sigh at the stalemate. Giving in to the elders' pressure, he orders Yixuan to hand over the spiritual pills. Looking at his uncle, Yixuan remembers the promise of a worry-free life and says he already knows about their plan to send him to the countryside. But he makes it clear that he has no intention of accepting that fate passively. Firmly, he declares that he will never accept living an ordinary and mediocre life. Because of that, he announces that he will leave the Yi family the next day and build a clan of his own. The entire hall is stunned when Yixuan declares that he is cutting all ties with the family. Outraged, the elders begin shouting, calling the young man crazy and ungrateful for abandoning the clan over 2 pills. Furious, they demand that the patriarch put an end to the situation and punish the young man immediately. The patriarch looks seriously at his nephew and asks whether he is truly determined to leave. Without hesitation, Yixuan confirms his decision. To the elders' surprise, the patriarch smiles, says he supports his decision, and simply asks him to take care of himself. The elders panic and try to make him reconsider, afraid that this will set a dangerous precedent within the clan. Losing his patience, the patriarch unleashes a powerful shout that silences the entire hall. He declares that no one is allowed to disturb Yixuan from that moment onward and promises severe punishment for anyone who disobeys. He then dismisses his nephew and advises him to take Lu Er with him. Yixuan thanks his uncle and privately acknowledges that the man has proven himself quite reasonable. Without looking back, he calls Li Er, and the two leave the hall beneath the elders' silent gazes. Ready to leave, they appear outside the mansion carrying the few belongings they own. Li Er asks her young master where they will go now. Yixuan decides that, for now, their best option is to rent a room at the Drunken Immortal Inn. The maid warns that their money will only cover 2 weeks at such a luxurious place, but Yixuan assures her that this will be enough time to recover his power. Hearing that he has a plan to heal himself using the 2 pills, Li Er becomes excited and regains hope. Soon afterward, the two arrive at the famous Drunken Immortal Inn. Once inside their room, Li Er says she will go downstairs to get them something to eat. As soon as she leaves and the door closes, the room becomes completely silent. Yixuan settles down and begins focusing his energy while a mysterious aura appears around his body. Nervous, he hopes his transmigrator system will not fail him now of all times. He swallows the first spirit condensation pill and activates the devouring command. Streams of spiritual energy flow throughout his body, and Yixuan watches the process in fascination. The system's progress bar reaches 70% as his destroyed Danshin begins rebuilding itself. However, the progress stops at 95%. A single pill was not enough. Without hesitation, he consumes the second pill, and a wave of golden energy erupts as the indicator reaches its maximum. The bar finally reaches 100%, confirming the system's complete activation. But a new message warns that the system has begun devouring his own Danshin instead of repairing it. Yixuan panics at the unexpected turn of events. An energy vortex forms in his abdomen and violently begins consuming what remains of his Danshin. Collapsed on the floor, he screams in pain, feeling as though his organs are being destroyed from the inside. Yixuan writhes across the room as the transformation continues. When Lu Er opens the door, she panics after finding her young master rolling on the floor in agony. Crying, the maid kneels beside him and begs him to hold on while Yixuan can barely respond. Nearly unconscious, he hears the final notification: his Danshin has been completely devoured, and the supreme power has been activated. The process finally ends, and Yixuan tries to catch his breath while feeling the changes within his body. Looking at his abdomen, he is surprised to discover that his Danshin has transformed and now contains an energy vortex. This is how the supreme devouring system manifests itself, capable of consuming any matter and converting into spiritual energy. Outside, the sun shines over the rooftops on a peaceful morning. Inside the room, Li Er is overjoyed to learn that her young master has finally recovered his cultivation. Yixuan smiles and explains that despite all the suffering, his body now feels full of power. Excited, Lu Er says she will order a feast to celebrate, and he immediately agrees because he is starving. The girl quickly rushes out the door, promising to return soon with food. As soon as he is alone, Yixuan's expression changes and he begins analyzing the situation more carefully. Sitting calmly, he decides to find out exactly what the devouring system is capable of doing. The interface reappears and confirms that everything absorbed will be converted into pure aura. Yixuan understands that he only needs to devour resources to increase his power, a far more direct path than traditional cultivation. The menu then displays 3 options: martial arts, bloodlines, and divine weapons. Curious, he decides to start with the martial arts section. The screen opens and displays several techniques intended for 5th grade practitioners. There is a little of everything from sword styles to powerful punches and flying kicks. Among them, Yixuan finds the Vajra Finger, a technique that concentrates power into a single point. The Sand Palm also appears, a technique designed for direct attacks using the palm. Since he is already at the 5th martial level, Yixuan becomes excited, believing he can learn those techniques immediately. To test it, he tries selecting the Tiger Fist, but an error message appears, warning that he does not have enough devouring points. Caught off guard, Yixuan asks the system how he can obtain those points. The interface explains that they are earned by devouring high-value items. Searching the room for something valuable, his eyes quickly land on a decorative porcelain vase. Yixuan picks up the object and wonders whether it might already be expensive enough to absorb. Full of confidence, he activates the devouring command on the vase. However, the system rejects the action and informs him that his posture is incorrect for performing the absorption. Unable to understand the requirement, Yixuan is horrified to discover that he would have to swallow the object through his mouth. Even though he finds the idea absurd, he decides to swallow his pride and give it a try. He raises the massive vase above his head, hoping no one appears and sees him in such a ridiculous situation. As soon as he brings the object close to his mouth, a glowing aura begins surrounding the porcelain. To his surprise, the vase rapidly begins shrinking under the effect of the light. Once it becomes small enough, Yixuan swallows it in one go. His excitement does not last long, as the system informs him that the vase was nothing more than junk and awards him 0 points. Annoyed, he complains about going through all that embarrassment without gaining anything at all. The interface reinforces that the host needs to devour genuinely valuable items to accumulate points. Thinking it over, Yixuan realizes he will need to find heavenly treasures or rare cultivation resources. And the fastest way to obtain those types of items seems to be exploring the 18 mountains of Lianyan. When he discovers that he can exchange 3 points for an ability that allows him to absorb items through touch, he feels relieved knowing he will not have to keep swallowing everything. His plans are interrupted when a sudden noise coming from the entrance catches his attention. Hearing shouting from downstairs, Yixuan realizes some kind of trouble has started. Lying on the floor, Lu'er is being cornered by an arrogant maid who humiliates her in front of everyone for refusing an order. Yixuan immediately recognizes maid's voice, and his expression completely changes. The aggressor continues insulting Lu'er while the girl cries helplessly on the floor. Enraged, the woman charges forward to tear at her face and teach her a lesson. Before she can touch her, however, a kick strikes her directly in the face. Yixuan appears at incredible speed, sends the woman flying, and places himself in front of Lu'er. He lands firmly, leaving the girl surprised by her young master's sudden arrival. Looking at her, Yixuan tells her not to be afraid and promises to protect her. Still frightened and with her face injured, Lu'er agrees with tears in her eyes. Then a mocking voice catches Yixuan's attention from the middle of the hallway. It is Chen Song who approaches while laughing and mocks the former city genius after discovering that he is still alive. The moment Yixuan looks at him, he immediately recognizes his face. He remembers that Chen Song was one of the men who ambushed him that night, the same man who is now mocking him for losing his cultivation. With a cold stare, Yixuan warns that Chen Song will pay both for the ambush and for laying his hands on Lu'er. Chen Song bursts into laughter in front of everyone, finding the threat amusing. He says Yixuan is nothing more than a lucky cripple and should be grateful that he survived the attack that night. Yixuan immediately fires back, saying it was never a fair fight, but a cowardly attack from behind carried out by 2 assassins. Taking a fighting stance, he declares that their score will be settled right there. Angered by the young man's audacity, Chen Song covers his fists in blue lightning and promises to finish him once and for all. Chen Song charges forward at high speed, trying to land a fatal blow. Gathering all the power of his lightning, he unleashes the thunder fists. Yixuan, however, remains completely still and stares at the incoming attack without even blinking. The energized punch slams directly into the young master's hand, releasing a massive shockwave. To Chen Song's astonishment, his attack is blocked with ridiculous ease. Holding his opponent's fist effortlessly, Yixuan mocks the strength behind the blow. Right afterward, he tightens his grip and begins crushing the enemy's hand. Using the power of the dragon reversal technique, he twists Chen Song's arm before the man can react. The assassin panics as he feels his bones breaking, unable to understand how Yixuan can still cultivate. Overwhelmed by the pain, Chen Song retreats while screaming after seeing his hand completely destroyed. Looking down at his fallen opponent, Yixuan sarcastically says he should thank the 2 brothers for helping him come back even stronger. With a threatening look, he declares that their conversation is over and tells Chen Song to prepare to die. Despite being defeated and bleeding, the man flashes a sinister smile and mocks Yangshan's courage. Chen Song warns that if he dies there, a bloody war will break out between the Chen and Yi families, putting Yixuan's clan clan at risk. Hearing the warning, Yixuan pauses for a moment and seriously considers his family's political situation. Taking advantage of his hesitation, Chen Song adds that the neighboring clans would also turn against the Ye family if war broke out. Thinking through the situation, Yixuan admits that an open conflict right now would indeed hurt his family. Since he believes the devouring system will soon give him enough power to destroy the Chen family, he decides to let Chen Song live for now. But just as Yixuan is about to walk away, Chen Song leaps at him from behind, trying to stab him with a poisoned dagger. Alert to the sneak attack, Yixuan reacts immediately and easily avoids the strike. With a single upward blow, he disarms Chen Song and sends the dagger flying away. The blade lands right beside the aggressive maid, who screams in fear. Disarmed and cornered, Chen Song begins trembling when he hears Yixuan confirm that he does not intend to kill him. But with a dark smile, the young man adds that this does not mean he has to leave him intact. Without giving him any chance to defend himself, Yixuan raises his leg and prepares his next attack. The kick lands directly on Chen Song and destroys the internal foundation of his cultivation. The man is sent flying backward and slides across the ground, overwhelmed by pain and terror. Yixuan immediately jumps after him and comes down with a stump on his fallen opponent. To finish things off, he kicks Chen Song's ruined body away. Yixuan coldly observes the result of his counterattack. Completely powerless, Chen Song's body slides out of the pavilion. The assassin falls to the floor below, completely unable to stand. From above, Yixuan simply flashes a mocking smile. Looking down at his humiliated opponent, he says he still has one final message for him. Seriously, he warns Chen Song never to try the same dirty trick twice. After that, Yixuan walks over to Lier to make sure she is alright. The guards who witnessed everything are shocked to realize that the young master has recovered his cultivation and decide to inform the patriarch. Meanwhile, news of Chen Song's defeat quickly reaches the Chen mansion. Inside one of the rooms, a doctor checks the injured man's pulse to determine the severity of the damage. Beside the bed, the clan leader and his eldest son wait anxiously for the diagnosis. Chen Shang, patriarch of the Chen family, asks the doctor about his son's condition. Dr. Liu explains that he managed to treat the broken bones, but warns that Chen Song will never be able to practice martial arts again. Chen Feng becomes furious after hearing this and refuses to accept that his brother will spend the rest of his life crippled. The doctor explains that his meridians were destroyed, but there is a rare blood jade herb capable of rebuilding them. The problem is that this medicinal plant is extremely rare and practically priceless. Furious over what Yixuan did, Chen Feng demands a solution to keep his brother from spending the rest of his life as an ordinary person. Considering the possibilities, Chen Xiang remembers that the 18 mountains contain a large number of spiritual herbs. Because of that, he orders Chen Feng to go there and search for the plant, but warns him not to venture into the deeper regions. The young man immediately agrees and prepares to carry out the mission. Chen Xiang then calls his subordinate Chen Yu and orders him to gather men to capture Yixuan and bring him back to be tortured. Chen Yu accepts with a sinister smile, saying he has already been wanting to teach the young man a lesson. The henchman quickly leaves to organize a search party throughout the city. Alone, the patriarch begins planning a visit to the Wu family to form an alliance against their rivals. Looking over the city from above, he swears that the end of the Ye family is only a matter of time. While his enemies conspire against him, the scene shifts to the outskirts of the 18 mountains of Lianyan. Unaware of the plans against him, Yixuan walks alone through the dense forest. Behind him, a massive red-eyed beast silently emerges from the shadows. Sensing the threatening presence at the last moment, Yixuan glances sideways and prepares himself. The creature charges at full force, but he dodges and places a hand on the monster's head. Using the beast's own momentum, Yixuan vaults over it and repositions himself. Shortly before Yixuan left for the mountains, everything had still been peaceful. From the room's window, Liu watched worriedly as her young master prepared to leave. In silence, she hoped he would complete his journey and return safely. A little earlier, the girl had grabbed his robe and tearfully begged him to let her come along. Yixuan simply patted her head and told her to be a good girl and stay behind. He explained that he needed to raise his cultivation quickly and that the mountains would be far too dangerous for her. He also warned that the Chen family would certainly seek revenge for what happened to Chen Song, so it would be safer for Li not to go outside. Understanding the danger, the maid agreed and only asked her young master to be careful. Back in the 18 mountains, birds take flight in alarm as the battle begins. Yixuan lands a jelly on a tree trunk after avoiding the beast's first charge. Satisfied, he realizes he managed to escape without suffering even a scratch. In front of him, the system identifies the monster as a wild boar, a level 2 demonic beast. Frustrated after missing, the boar turns around and charges again with all its strength. Yixuan releases his aura and decides to use the creature to test the power he has recovered. When the beast leaps toward him, he quickly moves into the proper position. A punch filled with energy strikes the boar directly in the head. The force of the impact crushes the monster's skull. The beast dies instantly, spilling blood across the area. Looking at the corpse at his feet, Yixuan concludes that he will need to be more careful as he moves deeper into the mountains. Even so, defeating a level 2 beast was far too easy, so he believes level 3 monsters will not be a problem either. Just as he is about to continue his journey, Yeshuan stops and looks back at the dead boar. Staring at the carcass, an idea begins to form in his mind. He remembers that the devouring system can absorb practically anything, which might include that beast. Yeshuan crouches beside the corpse and figures he has nothing to lose by trying. He then places his hand on the animal's body and activates the ability. A golden light surrounds the boar, and its entire carcass begins to dissolve. The beast's entire essence is converted into energy and absorbed by Yeshuan. Right afterward, the system confirms that he devoured a level 2 beast and received 20 points of spiritual power. The discovery excites Yeshuan, who realizes he can rapidly increase his cultivation simply by hunting monsters. From that point on, explosions and sounds of combat begin echoing throughout different parts of the mountains. Soon afterward, he defeats a level 2 Black Panther and receives another 20 points of spiritual power. Next, he eliminates a level 3 Fanged Wolf, gaining another 30 points. Even a third level flying creature ends up defeated and absorbed by the system. After a long day of hunting, night finally settles over the forest. In a more sheltered area, Yeshuan lights a campfire and takes the opportunity to rest. While roasting the beast meat, he calculates his progress and estimates that he will reach the intermediate stage of the 5th martial level in only 2 days. He also calculates that each level adds 100 pounds to his strength, and that his current strikes reach around 600, enough to handle any beast below level 4. Satisfied, he decides that the next day he will begin searching for level 4 monsters. Afterward, he looks upward and chooses a sturdy branch where he can safely spend the night. Before climbing up, he covers the campfire with dirt, so it will not attract attention in the darkness. The forest becomes quiet as the wind gently moves through the branches. Lying high in the tree, Yeshuan decides to end his hunting for the day and get some rest. Down below, a glowing albino snake begins silently slithering through the vegetation. Sensing a presence approaching, the young man realizes he has an unexpected visitor. Small points of blue light begin appearing among the plants in the darkness. The enormous reptile quickly slithers between the trees, heading straight toward his tree. Crouched on the branch, Yeshuan watches the creature draw closer and closer. Once he gets a better look at it, his eyes widen in recognition. It is a massive glowing snake crawling across the forest floor. Yeshuan identifies it as a white phosphorus python, a 3rd-grade beast. The monster's size catches his attention because the python appears much larger than it should be. Even so, he smiles. Since the prey came directly to him, he intends to take advantage of it. Using the system's devouring space, Yeshuan pulls a sword directly from his inventory. With the blade in his hands, he once again realizes how useful that spatial function is. To him, it is even better than ordinary spatial bags, and perfect for storing everything he obtains during his hunts. Yeshuan then leaps from the branch with his sword raised and attacks from above. An energy-covered slash cuts through the darkness toward the snake. The blade strikes its scales, sending out sparks and making the monster react furiously. Yeshuan lands firmly while the creature thrashes after the impact. Surprised by its durability, he realizes the python's scales are far too tough to cut through on the first strike. The white phosphorus python rises angrily and begins preparing its counterattack. A few drops of blood fall from the spot where the sword managed to damage its scales. But instead of continuing the fight, the snake suddenly turns around and quickly flees into the forest. Yeshuan did not expect that reaction and cannot understand why the monster retreated. Still holding his sword, he wonders why a beast that large would choose to run away without fighting. Remembering what he just saw, he notices an unusual black line running along the snake's scales. This makes Yeshuan suspect that the creature may have undergone a rare mutation after consuming a heavenly treasure. The possibility catches his interest, and he decides he cannot simply let the beast escape. Yeshuan follows the reptile's trail through the dense trees. During the pursuit, something hidden among the vegetation catches his attention. It is the entrance to a hidden cave, most likely the snake's lair. Yeshuan imagines that the treasure responsible for the beast's mutation might be hidden inside. With his sword in hand, he enters the dark cave, believing the pursuit could still prove extremely worthwhile. Carefully moving between the rocks, he begins exploring the underground hideout. Soon afterward, an unusual light deeper inside the cave catches his attention. In the middle of a watery cavern stands a stone altar with a glowing purple crystal floating above it. Looking at the object, Yeshuan deduces that the crystal may have been responsible for the snake's mutation. If something was capable of raising a beast from the 3rd to the 4th grade, then it must certainly be extremely valuable. Eager to discover how much he could gain from it, Yeshuan jumps across the rocks toward the altar. Reaching the center, he extends his hand and grabs the purple crystal. But the moment he touches it, a massive golden, scaled snake emerges furiously from the shadows. Yeshuan's eyes widen when he sees the threat appear so close to him. He leaps backward at the last second as the monster destroys part of the stone structure. From a safer distance, Yeshuan carefully observes the beast. A golden stripe runs along the reptile's body, which is nearly the same size as the previous snake. The creature slams its tail against the cave floor, sending dust and rocks flying everywhere. At that moment, the smaller snake Yeshuan fought earlier emerges from the water with an almost innocent expression. Without wasting any time, it leaps out and charges directly at him. Yeshuan avoids the lunge and counters with a quick sword strike. Now he understands there are 2 mutated white phosphorus pythons inside the cave. Looking at the crystal in his hand, he decides to make a risky gamble to turn the situation around. Yeshuan raises the glowing stone and chooses to place complete trust in the system's absorption ability. Without hesitation, he throws the purple crystal into his mouth to devour it. The system processes the mineral immediately and awards him 1,000 points of spiritual power along with 6 devouring points. The enormous surge of energy breaks through Yixuan's barrier, allowing him to reach the intermediate stage of the 5th grade. The interface confirms his advancement as a powerful golden aura surrounds his body. Sensing his sudden increase in energy, the two snakes attack together. Now stronger, Yixuan grips his sword confidently, believing he can finally cut through the monsters. He watches the two beasts approach and waits for the right moment. Channeling his new energy through the blade, he prepares to attack with everything he has. With a swift movement, Yixuan unleashes a horizontal slash at the smaller snake. His eyes remain locked on the target throughout the attack. The energized blade cuts through the air and leaves a glowing trail across the cave. This time, the strike passes completely through the white phosphorus python and cuts it in half. The two halves of the monster crash heavily onto the rocks. Yixuan looks at one of the halves near his feet, while the larger snake witnesses everything. He then turns his gaze toward the golden-scaled monster. Seeing its companion die, the giant snake is consumed by fury. Electricity begins flowing across its body as a deafening hiss echoes throughout the cavern. Feeling the pressure from the beast's aura, Yixuan becomes serious and prepares himself. The golden snake opens its jaws and attacks at terrifying speed. Yixuan blocks the lunge with his sword, but the force of the impact pushes him backward. Leaping across the rocks, he retreats while searching for a weak point in the monster's defenses. When he attacks the creature's body directly, his blade merely sends sparks flying from its scales. The impact knocks Yixuan backward, forcing him to regain his balance in midair. Surprised by the beast's toughness, he realizes he caused almost no damage. Sliding across the rocks, he complains that he still cannot cut through its hide even after advancing in level. Yixuan avoids a tail strike that destroys the ground and begins thinking about how he can win. The fight would be much easier if he had a sword technique available. Before he can find an answer, the massive snake suddenly appears behind him with its jaws wide open. Yixuan dodges in midair and remembers the devouring points he just obtained. Maybe now is the time to spend them. Even during the battle, he mentally opens the system's library and searches for a 5th grade sword technique. The interface displays several abilities at that level, including fist techniques, palm techniques, and sword styles. Among the options, Yixuan chooses the Gale sword technique. Without thinking twice, he confirms the exchange for the new ability. The system deducts 1 devouring point and completes the purchase as an aura of wind surrounds Yixuan. All the knowledge of the technique enters his mind at once, allowing him to master the style immediately. Moving like the wind, he delivers a precise slash against the snake. This time, the blade cuts through the tough scales and causes the beast's blood to spray out. Satisfied, Yixuan realizes he truly mastered the technique the instant he acquired it. Wounded, the golden snake charges furiously to devour him. Yixuan simply smiles at the incoming attack. Using the speed of the Gale technique, he unleashes several rapid slashes across the reptile's body. After exchanging attacks, the two move apart, while Yixuan maintains his fighting stance. Breathing heavily and beginning to sweat, he realizes that this 5th grade technique consumes an enormous amount of energy. Since his Chu cannot sustain many more attacks, he needs to finish the fight quickly. When the snake charges again with its mouth wide open, Yixuan decides to bet everything on one final strike. Gripping the sword with both hands, he channels all his remaining QI into the blade. The monster closes in, trying to swallow him whole. Yixuan then unleashes all his strength in a single vertical slash. The energized blade cuts straight through the giant snake and splits its body in half, spraying blood throughout the cavern. Yixuan lands safely as the beast's remains collapse inside the cave. Exhausted from the effort, he ends up sitting on the corpse to catch his breath. Thinking about the battle, he concludes that the mutated 5th grade snake was even harder to defeat than some ordinary level 6 beasts. To make future hunts easier, Yixuan asks the system for the devouring hand ability. The interface deducts 3 devouring points, and the new technique activates in his hands. He places his energy-covered hand on the snake's corpse and activates the devouring command. The enormous body immediately dissolves, granting him 300 points of spiritual power. Satisfied with the purchase, Yixuan is relieved that he no longer has to swallow items through his mouth. Since the fight took quite a while and dawn is approaching, he decides to quickly absorb the other snake and leave. The second carcass, belonging to a 4th level beast, is devoured and grants him another 100 points of spiritual power. Outside the cave, the first rays of sunlight begin shining through the mountain mist. Yixuan steps outside and shields his eyes from the brightness, amazed by how much his cultivation has grown in such a short time. With a satisfied smile, he also celebrates finally obtaining his first devouring points. While crossing a fallen tree over the stream, he confirms that only truly rare treasures and materials grant those points. Yixuan decides it is already time to head back, imagining that Luer must be worried about how long he has been gone. But heavy footsteps coming from the vegetation interrupt his thoughts. He stops and suspiciously looks toward the source of the noise. Without warning, a white silhouette leaps from the forest toward him. A massive white-furred demonic beast appears in midair, trying to strike him with its claws. While it is still airborne, Yixuan notices something catching around the animal's neck. The creature is wearing an ornate collar decorated with several seemingly valuable crystal stones. After landing, Yixuan identifies the beast as a 4th grade wind-hunting leopard and is surprised by the crystals around its neck. Immediately interested, he wonders who could be wealthy enough to put stones worth $1 million on a beast's collar. Without wasting any time, Yixuan begins chasing the leopard through the trees. However, the animal suddenly disappears from his sight. At that moment, an aggressive voice echoes in the distance, demanding that a girl hand over the bloodstone, cutting herb. Yixuan hides behind a tree and observes the situation. A masked girl girl dressed in white responds firmly, questioning whether the aggressor really has what it takes to threaten her. Taking a closer look, Yixuan recognizes the man as Chen Feng and finds it strange to encounter him there. Chen Feng leaps forward with his sword raised, determined to kill the girl and take the spiritual herb. The young woman moves agilely and avoids the first attack. Still in midair, she gathers energy in her palm to counterattack. Chen Feng mocks her attempt, extremely confident in his cultivation level. He surrounds his fists with purple lightning and prepares a powerful strike. The two techniques collide in midair, causing a violent explosion of spiritual energy. A powerful shockwave spreads across the area. The purple energy manages to overpower the girl's defense. Overwhelmed by the force of the attack, she coughs up blood and is sent flying backward. The young woman crashes onto the grass, her clothes torn by the impact. Watching from a distance, Yixuan finally recognizes Xu Qingqing, daughter of the richest man in the city and his childhood friend. Chen Feng leaps toward her with his sword ready to deliver the final blow. Seeing his friend in danger, Yixuan realizes he needs to act immediately. He snaps off a small branch with a leaf from the tree where he is hiding. Channeling QI into the branch, he throws it toward the battle at incredible speed. The small energized projectile strikes Chen Feng's sword as if it were made of iron and knocks the attack aside. Shocked that someone blocked him in such a way, Chen Feng turns around angrily to search for whoever interfered. Yixuan slowly steps out from behind the tree and sarcastically praises the impressive behavior of the Chen family's young master. With a mocking smile, he criticizes Chen Feng for being cowardly enough to attack an already injured woman. Hearing his voice, both Xu Qingqing and Chen Feng are shocked to see him there. Suspicious, Chen Feng asks whether Yixuan has been following him through the forest. Yixuan responds contemptuously that he would never waste his time following someone like him. Ignoring his opponent, he walks straight over to Xu Qingqing and asks where her father and guards are. Looking warmly at her friend, the girl tries to hide her pain and assures him that she is fine. Worried about Yixuan, she warns that he is only at the 4th grade and asks him to run while she holds off Chen Feng, who is at the 5th. Yixuan finds this amusing and asks why she entered the fight despite knowing the difference. Xu Qingqing admits that she only discovered it during the battle. Smiling, he pats his childhood friend on the head and reveals that he is no longer at the 4th grade. Xu Qingqing is surprised and blushes when she realizes that Yixuan managed to advance. Excited, she hugs his arm and praises him for reaching the 5th grade in less than a year. Right afterward, she angrily points at Chen Feng and tells Yixuan to give that guy a good beating. He asks Xu Qingqing to simply stay there and watch, promising to handle the situation himself. Chen Feng becomes irritated by his confidence and reminds him that during their previous confrontation, he did not even use his full strength. Now he intends to avenge his brother's broken arm using the Chen family's technique. Intimidated, Yixuan raises his energy-covered sword and says he would love to see him try. Furious, Chen Feng activates his dimensional ring and prepares for battle. He then charges forward, believing the fight might still bring him some worthwhile benefits. Their swords collide violently, sending sparks flying through the air. The clash is so loud that it frightens the birds throughout the forest. The duel continues, with their blades colliding repeatedly while neither side gives in. The force of their techniques creates a massive shockwave between them. When their swords lock together, Yixuan maintains a calm smile while Chen Feng has to use all his strength to hold him back. Realizing the difference between them, Chen Feng begins to lose confidence because of how relaxed his opponent looks. Yixuan applies even more force and throws him backward, sending his opponent sliding across the ground. Disoriented, Chen Feng shouts in disbelief that Yixuan's cultivation could have surpassed his own. Resting his sword on his shoulder, Yixuan mockingly says he owes this advancement to the two brothers. Furious, Chen Feng regrets not cutting off his head that night. Yixuan simply laughs and tells him it is already too late for regrets. Pointing his blade at his opponent, he declares that he will return the favor by finishing him in only 3 moves. Enraged by the provocation, Chen Feng charges with everything he has. He leaps high into the air to build momentum and attack from above. While airborne, he gathers energy to use the Chen family's lightning sword technique. Yixuan calmly watches the attack descend toward him. Gripping his sword tightly, he begins surrounding the blade with an intense current of wind energy. With a fluid movement, he positions himself to counter at exactly the right moment. Yixuan unleashes a wind slash that forms a massive whirlwind across the area. The attack races forward at incredible speed and collides directly with Chen Feng's technique. The collision between the two energies causes a massive explosion in midair. The impact sweeps across the area, making the ground shake and raising a huge cloud of dust. As the smoke begins to clear, Chen Feng looks ahead and believes the attack was nothing special. But Yixuan emerges from the haze without a single scratch and asks whether that famous lightning technique was really all he had. Chen Feng is stunned and asks what kind of martial art Yixuan cultivates to have escaped that attack completely unharmed. Yixuan smiles and explains that Lash he just used belongs to a 5th level martial art. He continues taunting his opponent, saying he might even teach him the technique if Chen Feng kneels down and begs. Breaking into a cold sweat, Chen Feng finally realizes how much trouble he has gotten himself into. He cannot understand where Yixuan obtained a 5th level martial art. Yixuan continues provoking him and suggests that he call him Godfather, while Chen Feng realizes he will lose if he keeps fighting head on. Seeing no other way out, Chen Feng discreetly immediately looks toward Xu Qingqing. In a cowardly move, he rushes toward the girl to use her as a hostage. Xu Qingqing is startled by the sudden charge, but Yi Zhuan immediately understands what his opponent is planning. He bursts forward at maximum speed while simultaneously ordering the system to exchange points for a 5th-level movement technique. The system deducts 1 devouring point and immediately confirms the acquisition of the new movement ability. With the new movement technique activated, Yi Zhuan cuts through the wind and races across the terrain at incredible speed. His body leaves a golden arc in the air as he rushes to intercept Chen Feng before he can reach Xu Qingqing. In the blink of an eye, Yi Xuan appears in front of his opponent and delivers a precise slash, sending blood spraying through the air. The strike catches Chen Feng in the middle of his charge and stops him before he can even touch the girl. The enemy collapses to the ground, defeated and bleeding from Yi Xuan's blade. Xu Qingqing is left speechless by how quickly everything ended. However, the momentum from the new technique is so powerful that Yi Xuan can barely stop himself. He plants his foot into the ground and tries to change direction, but his momentum sends him crashing straight into Xu Qingqing. The two fall together and roll across the ground from the force of the collision. After sliding several meters, they finally come to a stop, causing the startled girl to let out a scream. During the fall, Yi Xuan ends up directly on top of her in an extremely awkward position. Red with embarrassment, Xu Qingqing yells at him to get off her immediately. Feeling awkward, Yi Xuan gets up and apologizes, saying he accidentally slipped while trying to stop. Still embarrassed, he privately thinks that she smelled really nice. After the awkward moment passes, the two continue traveling through the 18 mountains of Lianyan. Still slightly embarrassed, Xu Qingqing admits that she would have died without his help and holds out a medicine bottle. Yi Xuan accepts the container in confusion, unable to understand why she is giving it to him. Taking a closer look, he notices an extremely rare reddish plant stored inside. Surprised, he asks whether she is really sure, recognizing the enormous value of the item. Xu Qingqing crosses her arms and replies that her life is worth far more than any herb. After all, her father is the richest man in the city, so she has no shortage of resources. Since she insists, Yi Xuan accepts the gift and stores the bottle inside his storage space. He then asks what she was doing alone in such a dangerous mountain range. Feeling slightly awkward, Xu Qingqing admits that she ran away from home because her father would not allow her to visit the Lian sect, but she ended up getting lost. Yi Xuan says she was lucky to run into him and suggests returning to Lian Yun, promising to treat her and Lu Ir to a huge feast. The idea excites the girl, who immediately complains that she is hungry and begins listing all the expensive dishes she plans to order. Soon afterward, the two finally arrive near the bustling Lianyan city. The moment they pass through the gates, a family servant desperately runs toward Yi Xuan. The man warns that Lu Ir was beaten and needs help immediately. Yi Xuan's expression darkens instantly. When he asks who dared to touch her, the servant reveals that it was people from the Chen family. Since they could not find Yi Xuan to take revenge on him, the men took all their anger out on Lu Ir. Yi Xuan grabs the servant by the shoulders and demands to know her condition. The man sadly explains that a violent energy struck her internal organs, and that Lu Ir probably will not survive until the next day. Yi Xuan's fury explodes when he hears this. He immediately rushes back to the residence, furious that they attacked someone completely defenseless just to get to him. Gritting his teeth, he realizes that he underestimated just how cruel the people of this world can be. Driven by rage, Yi Xuan races through the city and quickly returns to the courtyard of the Yi family residence. Inside one of the rooms, Lu Ir lies in bed, gravely injured and being cared for by an attendant. Yi Xuan pushes open the door and enters without wasting any time. In a serious voice, he asks the attendant to leave, and she respectfully obeys. The door closes, leaving Yi Xuan alone with Lu Ir. He approaches the bed and sees the girl trembling in pain beneath the blankets. Lu Ir cries and writhes, barely able to endure her internal injuries. Determined to save her, Yi Xuan opens the system and exchanges his points for 100 flowers due. 1 point is deducted and the medicinal item is delivered immediately. Without hesitation, he opens the newly acquired bottle. Yi Xuan helps Lu Ir sit up and has her drink all of its contents. The medicine is capable of eliminating harmful energies and easing injuries in cultivators at level 9 or below. Surrounded by a gentle light, Lu Ir finally relaxes and begins resting peacefully. Looking at the empty bottle, Yi Xuan silently feels grateful that he obtained devouring points in the mountains. Without them, it might have been too late. When he leaves the room, he finds several elders gathered in the courtyard, and their leader immediately calls out to him. Worried, the elder asks how Lu Ir is doing. Yi Xuan explains that he gave her a rare medicine he obtained during his journey and that she will be fine after getting some rest. Relieved, the elder also notices Yi Xuan has not only recovered his cultivation, but has become even stronger. Yi Xuan confirms this and reveals that he has already reached the intermediate stage of the 5th level. The elders celebrate, concluding that he must have encountered some great opportunity during his journey. Their leader then sighs and admits that if they had not pressured Yi Xuan over the pills, he might never have left the clan and Lu Ir would not have ended up injured. Acknowledging the elder's mistake, he asks Yi Xuan to leave the past behind and officially return to the Yi family. Yi Xuan replies that he understands their concern for the clan's growth and also recognizes that he will need the family's support to continue advancing. He adds that the blood of the Yi family runs through his veins and that, regardless of what happened, he is still part of the clan. Internally, however, Yi Xuan realizes that the elder's change in attitude has created an excellent opportunity for negotiation. The elders are delighted by his answer and praise his maturity for not holding a grudge. But Yixuan's expression changes when he says there is still one small detail. Raising 2 fingers, he makes it clear that he has 2 conditions for returning. The elder immediately agrees and guarantees that he will hear any request. With a cold smile, Yixuan presents the first one. He wants the Chen family completely eliminated from Lianyan City. The elder is shocked and warns that an open war could cause the Wu family to intervene. Yixuan responds with a sarcastic smile and reveals that he killed Chen Feng during his journey. The news leaves all the elders completely speechless. Realizing that conflict is now inevitable, their leader admits that they need to discuss the war seriously. He suggests continuing the conversation somewhere more private and invites Yixuan to the meeting hall. The group heads toward the clan's main buildings. Soon afterward, everyone arrives at the Yi family meeting hall to discuss their strategy. With the elders seated around him, Yixuan stands in the center of the room to present his plan. Their leader asks him to explain how he intends to destroy the Chen family, since he has clearly already thought of something. Yixuan confirms this, but warns that the plan depends directly on his second condition. He demands access to every heavenly level treasure stored by the Yi family. One of the elders immediately stands up and slams the table, refusing the request. Outraged, he says those treasures are resources reserved for future generations, and that handing them over would put the clan's future at risk. He also argues that it would be impossible for Yixuan to use such a massive amount of resources by himself. Faced with the resistance, Yixuan realizes that this elder still does not fully trust him. With a slight smile, he concludes that he will need to give them a more convincing explanation. Remaining calm, he raises his hands and asks the man to calm down. Yixuan then makes up a story that he encountered a mysterious expert in the mountains who restored his Danshan. According to him, his body possesses a rare devouring physique capable of consuming treasures and transforming them into energy. The supposed master taught Yixuan how to use this physique, allowing him to restore his Danshan and advance in level. The elder remains suspicious and admits that he has never heard of anything called the devouring physique. Because of this, he questions whether Yixuan simply invented everything to get his hands on the family's resources. Yixuan smiles confidently and says they can test him if they do not believe him. The clan leader intervenes and asks how many resources he would need to reach the next level. Clearing his throat, Yixuan replies that around 900,000 should be enough. The amount shocks the elders, since it is roughly equal to an entire month's worth of resources allocated to all the disciples. To make the proposal more attractive, Yixuan offers 2 5th-level martial techniques in exchange. The elders immediately exchange glances, impressed by the possibility of obtaining such rare martial arts. One of them demands that Yixuan provide at least one technique first, so they can verify its authenticity. He agrees without hesitation and asks for paper and a brush so he can write down the 2 manuals. Yixuan begins recording in detail the movement and sword techniques he acquired from the system. Soon afterward, he finishes the work and hands the documents to the elders. One of them eagerly takes the papers and begins examining the contents. While reading, he asks in amazement whether the 2 techniques were taught by the mysterious master and whether the clan's disciples are also allowed to practice them. Yixuan confirms this and says his master imposed no restrictions, so any family member can learn them. After understanding the movement technique, the elder is amazed and says it would greatly increase their chances against opponents of the same level. Satisfied with the result, the leader orders the main disciples to begin training both techniques immediately in preparation for the coming war. He also orders the elders to gather 900,000 worth of resources and deliver everything to Yixuan. Before anyone can leave, however, the leader emphasizes one important order. No one is allowed to reveal any information about Yixuan's physique or techniques outside that room, or they will face clan punishment. Everyone agrees seriously and promises that the secret will remain protected. Yixuan asks for the resource sources be delivered to his room and promises to show them another breakthrough the next day. He says he will reveal the rest of his plan once he proves that his method really works. The leader agrees and suggests that he get some rest, leaving the strategic details for the next day. Night falls over the Yi family residence. Alone in the hall, the elders celebrate, convinced that the heavens have finally favored their clan. One of them bursts into laughter and says Yixuan has truly become the family's lucky charm. Meanwhile, activity throughout the courtyards begins to increase. The following morning, servants hurry to carry out the orders they received. Carrying a large chest filled with treasures, they head directly toward Yixuan's quarters. The man in charge urges them forward, saying no one should keep the young master waiting. When they reach the courtyard, they announce that they have brought all the requested resources. From inside the room, Yixuan gives them permission to enter. The servants place the heavy chest on the floor, bow, and prepare to leave. Yixuan gestures for the group to go. Almost everyone leaves the room, but the chubby steward hesitates when he notices Yixuan is still staring at him. Yixuan calls him out directly and orders him to stay. Breaking into a cold sweat, the man clasps his hands together and nervously asks how he can help. Yixuan approaches with a smile and reminds him that he has been quite arrogant lately. The fat man panics and begins stammering that it was all just a misunderstanding. Afraid of being punished, he decides to humiliate himself before Yixuan even says what he intends to do. He throws himself to the floor and slams his head down so hard that he begins bleeding, begging for mercy. Yixuan is actually surprised by the reaction since he has not even threatened him yet. Seeing the man begging like that, he decides to forgive him in exchange for a small favor. Still bleeding from the forehead, the steward thanks him and immediately asks what he needs to do. Yixuan approaches and quietly explains what his task will be. With a serious look, he orders him to close closely monitor every movement Chen Song makes. Startled by Yixuan's expression, the man confirms that he is supposed to watch that exact target. He remembers he has a distant relative working for the Chen family and believes he can obtain the information easily. Yixuan makes it clear that he does not care how the man does it as long as he is never discovered. The steward promises that he will be extremely careful. Satisfied, Yixuan dismisses him and promises a generous reward if the job is done well. The man bows repeatedly and quickly leaves the room to carry out the mission. Finally alone, Yixuan opens the chest filled with coins, jewelry, pills, and other valuable resources. Faced with that small fortune, he celebrates the possibility of making another major breakthrough. Extending his hand over the contents, he immediately activates the devouring hand. A wave of energy surrounds Yixuan as every resource inside the chest is absorbed. The system confirms the devouring and announces that he has reached the 6th level of the martial path, while also receiving 11 devouring points. A powerful golden aura explodes around his body. Feeling the change, Yixuan celebrates his stronger physique and enormous increase in power. He now believes he could kill Chen Feng with a single punch. The following morning, sunlight shines over the Yi family training arena. The elders gather to watch the demonstration Yixuan promised. The young man positions himself in front of a massive stone slab covered in ancient inscriptions. An elder explains that the structure can withstand the strength of a 6th-level cultivator and that destroying it without using techniques will prove his advancement. Yixuan focuses only on his raw strength and surrounds his fist with golden energy. With a short motion, he pulls his arm back. Then he drives his fist directly into the slab. The impact completely destroys the stone, scattering pieces throughout the arena. Every elder is left speechless by the demonstration. One of them confirms, still amazed, that Yixuan truly reached the 6th level of the martial path. The elders begin praising him, pointing out that reaching this level at only 15 years old would be impressive even among the great sects. Proudly, the patriarch places a hand on Yixuan's shoulder and laughs at how much he advanced in such a short time. Yixuan thanks him, thinking that their reaction would be even greater if they knew his breakthrough happened instantly. Curious, one of the elders asks about the plan he promised to present. Yixuan explains that he intends to exchange martial techniques for family resources. This way, the clan grows stronger while he advances until he has enough power to eliminate the Chen family. The bald elder likes his ambition, but points out that the Yi family may not have enough resources to take him all the way to the 7th level of the martial Dao. Yixuan already has a solution: sell some of the techniques to the Lin family and use the money to buy the remaining resources from the market. This way, he believes they can increase their strength without throwing the clan directly into a future of war and destruction. After thinking it over, the elder agrees that the plan makes sense and gives his support. With everything decided, Yixuan announces that he will immediately begin recording more techniques. The group returns to the meeting hall. Yixuan sits down at the table while the elders remain gathered around him, watching everything. Silently, he opens the system and purchases 6 5th-level martial techniques, including the Tiger Roar and the Meteor Sword technique. The system confirms the transaction and deducts 9 devouring points. All the knowledge from the purchased techniques is transferred into Yixuan's mind. Focused, he quickly begins writing their contents onto scrolls. Among the completed manuals is the Tiger Roar. After examining the document, the bald elder is impressed and estimates that the 5th-level sound technique is worth at least 500,000 silver coins. The elders celebrate, believing these martial arts will greatly improve their chances against the Chen family. Yixuan's uncle approaches and asks for some time, saying he will personally inspect the treasury and arrange for more resources. Yixuan thanks his uncle and the elders, leaving that part of the preparations in their hands. Time passes as the preparations continue beneath the clear sky. Later, Yixuan heads toward the rear of the Ye family estate. When he opens the door to one of the rooms, he finds a surprise. Seeing Li Ir already awake in bed, he tells her that she has only just recovered and should continue resting. Surprised to see him, the girl remains speechless for several seconds. Overcome with emotion, Li Ir jumps out of bed and hugs him tightly, saying she thought she might never be able to serve him again. Yixuan pats her head and assures her that he would never abandon her. The moment is interrupted when Liu Ir's stomach growls loudly. Remembering that she was unconscious for 2 days, Yixuan realizes she must be starving and offers to have food brought in. Still hugging him, Liu Ir explains that Qing already went out to get something and asks Yixuan to stay a little longer. He finds this strange because the residence has plenty of food and there was no reason for her to buy anything outside. Liu Ir explains that Qing went to a specific restaurant known for serving dishes that help the body recover. Yixuan starts teasing her about simply wanting an excuse to eat something delicious, but knocking at the door interrupts their conversation. An urgent letter has arrived for him. Yixuan tells the servant to enter and hand him the message. When he opens the paper, he reads a threat: Qing has been kidnapped, and he must go alone to a forest 5 kilometers north of Lianyun. If anyone accompanies him, they will cut off her hand. Yixuan's expression immediately changes. He asks the servant where the person who delivered the letter is. The servant explains that someone simply threw the message at the entrance and ran away. Yixuan dismisses him so he can act without drawing attention. Noticing the change in his behavior, Li Ir asks what happened. To keep her from worrying, Yixuan makes up an excuse that Qing forgot her money while shopping and needs help paying. He then asks Li Ir to keep resting while he has food brought to her. Reassured by his explanation, she agrees with a smile, completely unaware of the danger Qing is facing. Soon afterward, Yixuan arrives at the forest indicated in the message. As soon as he enters the woods, he notices traces of energy cutting through the darkness between the trees. Alert, he slows down after noticing something ahead. In a clearing covered by mist, several figures wait silently. Hidden behind the vegetation, Yi Xuan observes everything before making his move. Two spear-wielding guards hold Qing captive on the ground. She appears slightly injured but remains conscious and composed. Scanning the surroundings, Yi Xuan notices several enemies hiding among the trees. This is clearly an ambush. Even so, he remains calm and begins thinking about the best way to act. Among the hidden men, a more experienced warrior appears to be commanding the entire operation. Yi Xuan recognizes him as Chen Qiang, an important member of the Chen family. He wonders why they went as far as kidnapping Qing Chung and suspects that Chen Feng's death may have been discovered. Since the enemies are prepared, attacking recklessly would only put the hostage in danger. Yi Xuan quickly comes up with another way to begin the rescue from a distance. He opens the system and exchanges points for an intermediate-level black iron bow. The interface confirms the purchase and deducts 2 devouring points. The bow materializes in his hands, surrounded by a glowing aura. Yi Xuan pulls back the string and prepares an arrow charged with martial energy. The shot cuts through the air and strikes the clearing with violent force. The 2 guards and Qing are startled by the sudden attack. The arrow takes out both guards in a single move, without hitting the girl between them. Furious after seeing his men fall, the leader shouts Yi Xuan's name. More trails of energy tear through the forest and strike the enemies hiding among the trees. Dust begins to settle as the entire ambush falls into chaos. Unable to react in time, several henchmen fall, leaving Qing free from her guards. Yi Xuan takes advantage of the opening and rushes toward her. In just a few moments, he appears beside Qing and moves to protect her. The leader shouts his name again, furious that his entire plan has fallen apart. He orders the remaining warriors to attack and not let either of them escape. Several armed men emerge from the shadows and surround Yi Xuan and Qing beneath the moonlight. Yi Xuan shows no concern and simply clicks his tongue with a smile. He then draws his sword and prepares to face the group. With the blade covered in energy, he taunts the enemies and asks whether the Chen family only knows how to use dirty tricks. Seeing the weapon in his hands, Chen Qiang's eyes widen as he recognizes the yin and yang ring. Yi Xuan moves his sword precisely and cuts Qing's restraints. The ropes are severed without causing the girl any injury. Now free, Qing smiles in relief after realizing that Yi Xuan really came to rescue her. Chen Qiang demands that he hand over the yin and yang ring and his 5th-level martial techniques. In return, he promises to let them leave and keep Chen Feng's death a secret. Yi Xuan narrows his eyes when he hears this. After all, the man should not know about either his new techniques or what happened to Chen Feng. Someone clearly passed that information along. To Yi Xuan, the conclusion is obvious: there is a spy inside the Yi family itself. Surrounded by so many enemies, he also realizes that protecting Qing during the fight will restrict his movements. Because of this, he pretends to be worried and decides to act as though he will accept the blackmail until an opportunity appears. Hiding a smile, he plans to use this false surrender to eliminate at least one of his opponents. In a low voice, he tells Qing to run as soon as an opening appears. The girl refuses, saying she cannot abandon him after he came alone to save her. Yi Xuan firmly explains that if she stays, she will only make the fight harder. If they both want to survive, she needs to listen to him. Growing impatient, the leader demands an immediate answer. Pretending to hesitate, Yi Xuan asks whether he will truly keep his promise if he hands everything over. Chen Lao smiles confidently and assures him that he always keeps his word. Yi Xuan pretends to believe him and accepts the terms. He reaches inside his clothes as though he is about to pull out the requested items. Suspicious, Chen Lo orders one of his henchmen to go collect them. The man approaches greedily and demands that Yi Xuan hand everything over. In an instant, Yi Xuan moves and tells him to try catching what comes next. A golden flash explodes in front of the henchman and blinds him. The blade pierces the enemy before he can react. Furious at the trick, Chen Lao says he can simply take everything from Yi Xuan's corpse and orders an all-out attack. Several warriors leap from the trees at the same time. Yi Xuan reacts immediately and blocks the first assault with his sword. While holding off the enemies, he shouts for Qing to use the opening and escape. This time she obeys, races deeper into the forest, and promises to return with reinforcements. Chen Lao makes no attempt to stop her. To him, eliminating Yi Xuan first is far more important. Under his orders, 3 swordsmen attack together from above. Yi Xuan gathers a massive amount of energy into his blade. He then executes the triple storm thrusts and pierces all 3 men almost simultaneously. Recognizing the move, Chen Lao realizes it is the same 5th-level technique mentioned in the information he received. Impressed by its power, he charges forward, even more determined to take it for himself. Surrounded by flames, he claims that with a technique of that level, he could compete with his own older brother for leadership of the clan. Chen Lao attacks from above while engulfed in fire, but Yi Xuan easily avoids the strike. The man continues pressuring him with a series of attacks covered in flaming chuai. Yi Xuan retreats with quick movements and keeps his distance. After witnessing that speed, Chen Lao celebrates because it confirms that the information he received from the old man of the Yi family was true. Excited by the battle, he tells Yi Xuan to stop running and face him head-on. Yi Xuan accepts the challenge and releases his golden aura. With an explosive burst of speed, he charges forward as a powerful gale forms around him. Cutting through the air beneath the full moon, he descends on his enemy like a meteor. Yixuan uses the storm thrusts again, concentrating all his strength into a single point. Chen Lao defends himself as best he can while a series of impacts crashes against his guard. The force finally sends him flying backward while Yixuan lands firmly in the clearing. The young man clicks his tongue and sarcastically remarks that the man's defense is tougher than he expected. Chen Laowu, meanwhile, realizes that Yixuan has already reached the initial stage of the 6th level of the martial Dao. Taking advantage of his opponent's surprise, Yixuan demands to know how he obtained such confidential information. Surrounded by flames, the man simply smiles. Instead of answering, he launches another attack and tells Yixuan to ask King Yama after he reaches hell. Yixuan dodges at the last second and feels the heat pass right beside his face. With an agile movement, he slips beneath his opponent's arm. From that angle, he clearly spots an opening in the man's stance. Yixuan takes advantage of it and delivers an upward slash. Chen Lao's eyes widen as he sees the sword approaching without enough time to retreat. An arc of golden light cuts through his defense, tears through his clothes, and opens a wound across his chest. The strike sends 2 small bottles hidden in his clothing flying through the air. Chen Lao's desperate reaction when he sees them fall immediately catches Yixuan's attention. One container holds rejuvenation pills, while the other contains QI explosion pills. Yixuan lunges forward before the bottles can hit the ground. With ease, he catches both of them in midair. He lands calmly in the clearing, now holding his opponent's resources. Looking at the first container, he confirms that it really contains rejuvenation pills. Seeing Chen Lao's irritated expression, Yixuan realizes how important those medicines were to him and does not miss the chance to mock him. Without hesitation, he stores both bottles inside his devouring space with a provocative smile. Cornered, Chen Lao admits to himself that he never imagined Yixuan would be this difficult to defeat. Desperate to avoid dying there, he takes out another emergency pill and swallows it in one go. An explosion of flaming energy erupts around his body. Sensing the danger from the shockwave, Yixuan leaps backward and keeps his distance. From the violent reaction, he immediately recognizes the QI explosion pill. With his eyes glowing red, Chen Lao confirms that he has just used the forbidden substance. The pill temporarily raises cultivation by an entire stage, and in rare cases can even increase it by 2 levels. Luckily for him, the maximum effect activates, sending his power directly to the 7th level of the martial Dao. Intoxicated by his newfound strength, Chen Lao charges forward at incredible speed to crush Yixuan. Feeling the pressure increase dramatically, Yixuan becomes serious and prepares himself. He adjusts his grip on the sword and gathers all the Q available to withstand the incoming attack. Spinning the blade in a spiral, he creates a barrier of golden slashes around his body. With his feet firmly planted on the ground, he waits for the impact without retreating. Chen Lao's flame-covered fist violently collides with Yixuan's defense. The collision tears through the air and sends a powerful shockwave across the clearing. In the middle of the flash, Yixuan notices another threat approaching. Taking advantage of his increased speed, Chen Lao appears behind him to deliver a fatal blow. With his hand covered in flames, the man grabs Yixuan's blade directly. The young man tries to pull his sword free, but realizes the weapon is completely trapped in his opponent's hand. With his blade immobilized, Yixuan temporarily has no room to counterattack. The difference in strength makes it obvious just how much the pill increased Chen Lao's power. With a cruel smile, the man tells Yixuan that his time has finally come. He then drives a flaming punch directly into his chest. The blow makes Yixuan cough up blood and inflicts a serious injury. Sent flying backward, he loses his balance in midair while trying to recover. Even so, he reacts quickly and pulls out the black iron bow again. Still airborne, he draws the string and gathers energy to form a glowing arrow. Keeping his eyes locked on the target, he adjusts his aim before touching the ground. Yixuan unleashes the 5-star orbs technique, firing several golden projectiles at his opponent. Annoyed by the counterattack, Chen Lao shouts that the young man is courting death. The shots strike the ground and trigger a series of explosions. The man crosses his arms in front of his face to withstand the force of the impacts. Without slowing down, he charges through the smoke and continues advancing. Leaping through the air, he descends on Yixuan with another flame-covered strike. The attack explodes against the ground, spreading fire and dust throughout the area. Yixuan rolls across the dirt, injured but still trying to stay on his feet. Confident in his advantage, Chen Lao tells him to hand over the dimensional ring in exchange for a quick death. Injured, Yixuan calculates that he needs to advance at least a little further within the 6th level to defeat him. Unable to see an immediate way out, he begins thinking about how to turn the fight around. Then he remembers the bottles of pills he took from his enemy. With a new idea, he activates the system and orders it to devour the contents of one container. The absorption grants him 1,000 points of spiritual energy and pushes Yixuan directly into the advanced stage of the 6th level of the martial Dao. An intense aura surrounds his body as he feels another sudden increase in power. Yixuan then comes up with a plan to lure Chen Lao closer and use the tiger roar at point-blank range. Suspecting nothing, his opponent approaches and asks whether he has decided how he wants to die. Yixuan calmly replies that he has not decided to die yet. A subtle smile appears on his face before he finishes his sentence. Pointing at Chen Laoyu, he declares that the one dying there will be him. Furious at the provocation, the man charges again while surrounded by flames. His fist flies directly toward Yixuan, who remains standing still in the middle of the clearing. The young man keeps a faint smile and waits for exactly the right moment. The attack lands directly on him and causes a massive explosion of fire. Smoke and dust completely cover the battlefield. Gradually, the cloud begins to dissipate. Yeshuan's body appears motionless on the ground, as if he has been defeated. Chen Lao walks through the dust until he stops beside him. Seeing him lying there, he sighs in relief and believes he has finally killed him. As he crouches down to search the body, he admits that Yeshuan's talent would have made him a terrifying opponent in the future. But when he searches for the dimensional ring, he finds nothing and begins growing uneasy. Distracted while searching the young man's clothes, Chen Lao fails to realize that he has fallen directly into a trap. Yeshuan discreetly opens one eye and waits for the perfect opening. At point-blank range, he activates the Tiger Roar and releases a sonic blast directly at his opponent. The sound wave strikes Chen Lao head-on and sends him flying backward as he screams in pain. The vibration destroys his eardrums and causes severe internal damage. Soon afterward, hurried footsteps begin echoing through the forest. Qing appears running between the trees, desperate to find out what happened. When she reaches the clearing, she immediately freezes at the sight before her. Relieved to see Yeshuan alive, she calls out to him emotionally. Lying on the ground and covered in blood, Chen Laoyu asks in disbelief how the young man is still standing. Yexuan reveals that he used healing medicine to treat his injuries and quickly recover his strength. Pointing his sword at the man, he changes the subject and begins interrogating him. He demands to know how the Chen family obtained confidential information about the Yi family's internal affairs. Even after being defeated, Chen Lao remains silent. After the confrontation ends, peace once again settles over the mountains beneath the full moon. Still amazed by everything that happened, Qing approaches Yixuan. The two begin walking back through the forest. Walking beside him, Qing asks whether Yixuan suffered any serious injuries. She also wants to know what happened to all the other men involved in the ambush. Yixuan replies that he already dealt with them, and that they now need to return to the Yi family residence immediately. Relieved that they are safe, Qing agrees. Later, the scene shifts to the rear of the Yi family estate. Inside the study, Yixuan's uncle works attentively while organizing the newly copied manuals. When the door opens, he looks up and is surprised to see Xuan Er. Showing him the completed copies, he suggests that the two visit the Lin family the following morning. Yixuan crosses his arms and proposes that they go that very night. Confused by the urgency, his uncle asks whether something happened. With a cold expression, Yexuan reveals that he just killed Chen Laowu. The elder spits out his tea in shock. Right afterward, he grabs Yixuan by the shoulders and asks whether he was injured in the fight. Remaining calm, the young man assures him that he is fine. His uncle asks about his current level, remembering that the enemy was a powerful 6th level expert. Yixuan explains that he reached the advanced stage of the 6th level during the battle and defeated him using his sound technique. The two sit down, and his uncle asks why the Chen family attacked and whether they already discovered Chen Feng's death. Yexuan confirms that their rivals really do know what happened. However, that information did not come from an outside investigation. Seriously, he states that there is a traitor within the Yi family itself. Shocked, his uncle demands to know who it is. Yexuan directly points to the Great Elder. His uncle is surprised and asks whether he is really certain about such a serious accusation. Yexuan explains that he forced a confession from the enemy and discovered that the Great Elder had been selling confidential clan information. Furious, his uncle slams the table when he hears this. He is outraged that someone could hold such a high position and still betray his own family. After trying to calm himself down, he asks what else Yixuan discovered. The young man reveals that the Chen family has sent several gifts to the Wu family. His uncle immediately realizes the danger of an alliance between the two clans. Yexuan agrees and states that such a partnership poses a direct threat to the Yi family. Given the seriousness of the situation, his uncle admits that they need to visit the Lin family that very night. Under the moonlight, the two immediately depart. Soon afterward, they arrive at the entrance of the imposing Lin family residence. The Lin patriarch welcomes them into the main hall and smilingly asks why they are visiting so late at night. Looking at Yexuan, he mentions hearing rumors that his Danshan has been restored. Politely, Yexuan thanks him and says the spiritual pills he received earlier were extremely helpful. The patriarch sighs, assuming that he may still hold resentment over the cancelled engagement. Yexuan clarifies that he is not being sarcastic and that his gratitude is genuine. Feeling guilty, the man admits that the Lin family truly handled the broken promise poorly. To compensate him, he even offers other unmarried young women from the clan for Yexuan to choose from. Flustered, the young man asks him not to make that kind of joke. Internally, however, he thinks that receiving several potential brides at once might not be so bad. His uncle clears his throat and ends the joke before the conversation drifts completely off topic. With a serious expression, he explains that they came to discuss important business. He places a scroll on the table and asks the patriarchs to examine its contents. As soon as he opens the document, the man is impressed to realize that it contains a 5th level technique never before seen in Lian Yun. Surprised by the manual's value, he asks exactly what they want. Yexuan's uncle explains that he possesses several other 4th and 5th level manuals. He offers to sell all of these techniques exclusively to the Lin family. The patriarch stands up in surprise after learning that none of them are circulating throughout the region. Yexuan's uncle confirms the manuals are authentic, but warns that there is one condition. Interested in the opportunity to strengthen his clan, the patriarch immediately asks what it is. Payment must be made entirely in crystals and natural cultivation materials, with delivery completed that very night. Considering the demand simple enough, the Lin leader accepts without hesitation. He quickly leaves the hall to order his subordinates to prepare everything. While waiting, Yixuan thinks about the Lin family's financial power and how they can afford amounts far beyond the Yi family's total wealth. The night progresses as servants begin gathering boxes of materials. Soon afterward, the door opens again. The patriarch returns with a smile and says his men are already preparing all the crystals and resources. Taking a sip of tea, Yixuan's uncle says that with the business settled, they can now discuss the truly important matter. His expression becomes serious. Noticing the change in atmosphere, the Lin patriarch asks what happened. Yixuan's uncle reveals that the Wu and Chen families are forming an alliance. The news catches their host by surprise. According to him, the main objective of this alliance is to completely destroy the Yi family. Understanding the danger, the Lin patriarch guarantees that he will not simply stand by and watch his allies fall. The two leaders shake hands and officially establish an alliance between their families. From that point forward, the Yi and Lin clans will face their enemies together. Yixuan's uncle emphasizes that each family will support the other if war truly breaks out. Watching such an overly sentimental exchange, Yixuan feels slightly awkward. Returning to the subject, Patriarch Lin points out that Wu Tian, the city lord, is an 8th level cultivator. However, he reveals that his own father is currently in secluded cultivation, and that once he emerges, their enemies will no longer pose such a serious threat. Yixuan's uncle immediately realizes that the veteran of the Lin family is about to reach the 9th level. Impressed, he congratulates the clan in advance. The patriarch accepts the congratulations, but knocking at the door interrupts the conversation. A subordinate reports that all the carriages and materials are ready. The Lin leader says he has also arranged an escort to accompany them back. In the courtyard, several carriages loaded with chests are waiting to depart. The two leaders exchange cordial farewells at the mansion entrance. The convoy travels through the city's empty streets, illuminated by torches and moonlight. Walking beside one of the carriages, Yixuan's uncle asks whether that amount of resources will be enough for him to advance again. Confidently, the young man assures him that it should be enough to reach the 7th level. Without them immediately noticing, masked figures begin moving across the rooftops. His uncle grows even more excited at the thought of his nephew reaching the 7th level at only 15 years old. While imagining Yixuan's bright future, a faint noise comes from the roof above. With his sharpened senses, Yixuan notices the footsteps and becomes serious. A silent attack cuts through the air toward the convoy. A hooded assassin surrounded by purple energy drops from above toward Yixuan's uncle. Sensing the danger, Yixuan shouts a warning and charges forward to intercept the strike. Golden energy gathers in his palm as he prepares a counterattack. Yixuan strikes the attacker while he is still airborne, preventing the attack from reaching his uncle. The collision creates a bright flash and sends a shockwave through the street. Yixuan slides across the ground while absorbing the force of the impact. Looking at the surrounding shadows, he briefly wonders whether the Lin family itself could have arranged the ambush. The leader of the masked attackers immediately orders everyone to attack. Several figures descend from the rooftops with weapons in their hands. The assassins fall upon the escort, throwing the entire street into chaos. Yixuan's uncle realizes too late that one of the strongest enemies is heading directly toward him. Surrounded by a purple aura, the masked man descends with a powerful strike. The attack hits the elder's chest and breaks through his defensive stance. Faced with the aggressive combination of attacks, he is forced to defend himself in a hurry. The force of the blows is strong enough to crack the stones beneath them. Thrown backward by the shockwave, the elder retreats through the air while trying to regain his balance. The crater left behind by the attack shows just how powerful those invaders are. Yixuan's uncle recognizes the joint swimming fish technique belonging to the Wu family. When two practitioners at the peak of the 6th level use this formation, they can even fight someone at the intermediate stage of the 7th. The combination of the two enemies creates a violent confrontation beneath the moonlight. Their attacks destroy part of the street and scatter stones throughout the area. Faced with such power, the elder realizes that the situation has become far more complicated. Meanwhile, Yixuan quickly avoids another masked attacker's strike. He dodges a punch without losing control of the fight. Analyzing the situation, he concludes that if the Lin family truly wanted to betray them, there would be no reason to arrange an attack like this. Besides, his uncle is far too busy fighting for his own life to help him. Yixuan decides he needs to finish his opponent as quickly as possible. He charges forward and delivers a direct strike against the masked man. Currents of electrical energy begin surrounding his movements. Yixuan then uses the explosive thunder fist to break through his opponent's defense. From the man's fighting style, he recognizes him as a member of the Chen family and is surprised by how quickly their enemies reacted. Yixuan uses his movement technique to gain tremendous acceleration. Gathering his strength, he bursts forward. The attack strikes the masked man head on and causes a powerful explosion. The man is sent flying and crashes into the ground. Yixuan charges toward him, determined to discover who is hiding behind the mask. With a leap, he closes the distance in an instant. He reaches the fallen enemy before the man can recover. His hand goes directly toward the attacker's face. With one quick motion, Yixuan rips away the cloth hiding his identity. After seeing the man's face, he finally confirms who is behind the attack. On the other side of the battlefield, his uncle also reacts in shock after recognizing an important figure among the attackers. Before they can process the discovery, another masked man jumps down from one of the rooftops. The new enemy descends toward Yixuan with an energy-filled attack. Sensing the threat, he prepares to withstand it. The impact destroys one of the carriages and sends pieces of wood flying everywhere. Amid the dust, Yixuan's hand ends up resting on one of the transported chests. Coughing from the debris he recovers beside the cargo. Even in the middle of the battle, he pays attention to what is right in front of him. Two of the chests filled with resources remain almost completely intact. The moment he notices this, an idea immediately comes to mind. Yixuan places his energized hand on one of them. With a smile, he activates the devouring hand. The system absorbs the resources and announces that he has reached the 7th level of the martial path, while also receiving 6 devouring points. As his new energy stabilizes, the enemy begins moving again to continue the attack. Noticing Yixuan's hand, the masked man becomes alarmed after recognizing his ring. Beneath the moonlight, Yixuan looks at the man and mockingly asks whether he also came after that artifact. He then says that if the man wants his belongings so badly, perhaps he should start calling him father. Enraged, the enemy charges forward while shouting that Yixuan is far too arrogant. Even as the man approaches at high speed, Yixuan remains completely calm. The attacker descends with a heavy strike meant to crush him. Yixuan simply steps out of its path at exactly the right moment. Immediately afterward, he gathers energy into his hand. A quick strike lands directly on his opponent's chest. The attack pierces through his defense and sends blood spraying out. The speed of the attack leaves the other warriors stunned. A cold smile appears on Yixuan's face when he notices their reaction. Without giving his opponent any chance to recover, he finishes the attack and kills him. The man's blood splashes across the Great Elder's face as he watches everything in shock. Terrified by what he just witnessed, the old man can barely speak. He panics, turns around, and tries to flee. Yixuan notices the attempt and sarcastically asks whether he really thinks he can escape. Without wasting any time, he prepares the bow again. From an elevated position, he carefully adjusts his aim. Yixuan draws the string and gathers a massive amount of energy into the shot. The arrow tears through the air and strikes the Great Elder directly in the leg. The traitor loses his balance and falls while screaming in pain. He collapses on the ground before Yixuan and the patriarch. Realizing that their mission has failed, the remaining masked men hesitate. Their remaining leader orders an immediate retreat. The men leap across the rooftops, trying to disappear into the night. Yixuan simply laughs when he sees them running away. Drawing the bow again, he warns that they cannot simply attack him and leave. Any provocation against him will come at a price. The next shot crosses the rooftops like a streak of light. The arrow pierces through both fleeing men while they are still in midair. Their bodies fall onto the street, bringing the ambush to a definitive end. With the confrontation over, Yixuan approaches the defeated Great Elder. Nearby, the body of one of the attackers remains motionless. His uncle confirms that the dead man is Elder Shuangzai of the Wu family. Yixuan listens to the information while mentally reorganizing everything that happened. He then points at the injured Great Elder and reveals that he is the real spy within the Ye family. Outraged, his uncle asks why he betrayed his own clan. Lying on the ground, the old man reacts to the accusation with contempt. He then begins laughing and calls the patriarch knave. As his uncle grows angry, Yixuan intervenes and asks exactly what the Chen family offered him in return. The traitor looks at the young man and mockingly admits that at least he is much smarter than his uncle. Yixuan puts the pieces together and concludes that the Chen family promised to make the Great Elder the patriarch of the Yi family. The old man's reaction confirms that he is right. His uncle becomes furious after realizing that the entire betrayal was driven by ambition for control of the clan. Unable to deny it, the Great Elder remains silent. Finally, he confesses that the Chen family really did promise to put him in control of the Yi family after the mission. Surprised by the deduction, he asks how Yixuan figured it out. The young man replies that someone as greedy as him could only be motivated by an enormous reward. A man like that seeks either money or power. If it was not simply wealth, then control of the family was the only possibility left. Besides, the contempt he constantly showed toward the current patriarch had already made his intentions quite obvious. Yixuan grabs the old man by the collar and mocks his ambition. Energy begins gathering in his hand as he warns that he will destroy the traitor's cultivation. The Great Elder panics and begs him not to do it. Yixuan shows no mercy and delivers the strike. The attack hits the old man's vital point. He coughs up blood and instantly loses all his strength. His cultivation foundation is completely destroyed, leaving him without any martial power. Yixuan remembers every time that man made his life difficult and makes it clear that he feels no pity for him. With that, the punishment comes to an end. His uncle suggests taking the traitor back to be publicly judged under the clan's laws, and Yixuan agrees. Even after being defeated, the old man still laughs and warns the Chen family will attack soon. However, he is still hiding one final desperate attempt. The traitor begins gathering energy to self-destruct and try to take both of them with him. Yixuan and his uncle notice the danger and immediately become alert. Soon afterward, the night continues over the Chen family residence. Faced with the crisis, Yixuan and his uncle decide to launch a surprise attack on the Chen family with support from the Lin family. As for the Wu family, their plan is to buy time until the Lin ancestor finishes his secluded cultivation. His uncle tells Yixuan to notify their allies while he gathers the Yi family warriors. Yixuan agrees and leaves to handle his part. Meanwhile, the main entrance of the Chen estate appears completely peaceful. However, several armed men are already moving silently through the surrounding shadows. The warriors advance in formation, trying to enter the mansion without alerting the guards. The first sentry is eliminated before he can send any warning. Yaxuan leads the allied forces through the courtyard and instructs everyone to continue advancing silently. At the rear of the estate, one of the Chen family's young masters spends the night enjoying himself without a care in the world. Hidden on the rooftop, Yaxuan watches the courtyard without being noticed. The hare plays blind man's bluff with several women, completely unaware of the danger. While everyone remains distracted, Yaxuan prepares to descend. He silently lands in the courtyard and waits for the right moment. The young Chen continues playing with the girls, unaware that an intruder is standing nearby. Yaxuan watches everything coldly, ready to put the next part of his plan into action. From the rooftop, Yaxuan prepares his energized bow to take the shot. Down below, the Chen hare remains distracted, trying to kiss one of the women. With a cold gaze, Yaxuan releases the glowing arrow directly toward his target. The shot pierces through the young master's head in the blink of an eye and kills him instantly. The woman is horrified when she sees the bloodied body fall beside her. Her screams echo throughout the entire Chen family estate. Hearing the commotion in the courtyard, Patriarch Chen rushes outside and demands to know what happened. An injured guard runs toward him and warns that the Yi and Lin families have joined forces. The two forces have launched a surprise attack on the estate. The allies have already broken deep into their defenses and are taking down guards along the way. Desperate, the subordinate asks for help and reveals that most of their men have already been eliminated. Furious, the patriarch orders every survivor to gather in the courtyard and resist. Meanwhile, the battle continues, intensifying beneath the moonlight. Fighting spreads throughout the estate as violent attacks are exchanged on every side. One of the Chen leaders begins panicking as he watches his men fall without even knowing where the attacks are coming from. Hidden high in a tree, Yaxuan continues firing arrows. Each streak of light finds a target and brings down another warrior from a distance. Another man is struck before he can even realize where the shot came from. Confident in the technique, Yaxuan calculates the trajectories and manages to strike enemies across different parts of the battlefield. Even while fighting, he is already thinking about looting the Chen family's treasures and using those resources to improve his abilities even further. Before long, the courtyard is filled with the bodies of defeated Chen warriors. Seeing his forces being destroyed, the patriarch furiously charges toward the leader of the Yi family. He raises his blade and tries to deliver a fatal strike. Yaxuan's uncle reacts at exactly the right moment and counters with fists covered in energy. The collision between their attacks causes a massive explosion in the center of the courtyard. After the main confrontation, the Chen estate is completely taken over by the allied forces. From high in the tree, Yaxuan observes the result and confirms their victory. The immediate threat from the Chen family has finally been eliminated. With the battle over, he decides it is time to visit the enemy clan's treasury. Searching through the estate, he finds a luxurious pavilion hidden in the rear. Realizing that this must be the Chen family's treasury, an interested smile appears on his face. But when he enters, he finds only a few boxes containing seemingly ordinary items. The first contains only a 30-year-old wild ginseng. In the second, he finds ordinary 50-year-old pearls. Yaxuan immediately finds this strange. The third largest family in the city could not possibly have such a miserable treasury. Thinking it over, he concludes that there must be some hidden compartment inside. He begins examining the room until he turns the base of a candlestick. The wall moves aside and reveals a secret passage, confirming his suspicion. Outside, dawn approaches while the city remains silent. Inside the real treasury, Yaxuan finally discovers an enormous amount of valuable resources. Afterward, he confirms that he has reached the intermediate stage of the 7th level of the martial path and has also awakened a rare bloodline. A glowing symbol appears before him as the system introduces the new ability. It is the bloodline of 100 beasts, whose progression is currently only 1 out of 100. To complete it, Yaxuan will need to devour the blood essence of 107th ranked demonic beasts. Once fully activated, the bloodline will greatly increase his physical strength. He considers returning to the 18 mountains of Lianyan to hunt, but there is still something more urgent. Before anything else, he needs to finish off the Chen and Wu families once and for all. When he returns to the courtyard, Yaxuan is surprised to find a large crowd gathered there. He approaches his allies and asks what happened. A warrior explains that the Wu family took advantage of the attack on the Chen family to split its forces and attack the Yi and Lin residences. Yaxuan asks how they discovered this. The man reveals that Wu Tian himself appeared and told them everything while trying to force them to surrender. Annoyed, Yaxuan curses his opponent's underhanded strategy. Looking at the siege, he warns his uncle that Wu Tian is only trying to buy time. If the Wu troops capture both residences, they can use the captured family members as hostages to demand surrender. Because of that, Yaxuan argues that they need to attack immediately. His uncle hesitates and reminds him that acting recklessly against Wu Tian could be dangerous. After all, the man is at the 8th level of the martial path and would be difficult to fight even with several leaders working together. The Wu family also has several 7th level experts supporting him. Even so, Yaxuan offers to fight Wu Tian alone. The elders are completely stunned by the proposal. His uncle immediately protests, saying that as the future of the clan, he cannot risk his life like that. Yaxuan simply smiles and assures him that he knows what he is doing. He explains that he is already at the intermediate stage of the 7th level and possesses martial arts of the same grade, so he believes he can injure Wu Tian. Meanwhile, the elder should eliminate the other 7 7th level experts and then help him finish the fight. Faced with his nephew's confidence, his uncle eventually gives in and only asks him to be careful. Beneath the full moon, everyone begins preparing for the decisive confrontation. Yexuan gathers energy into his bow and feels the weapon vibrating in his hands. He then opens the system to upgrade his Chaos Star arrow technique. 20 devouring points are deducted, raising the ability to the 7th grade. With the technique upgraded, Yixuan smiles confidently. Outside, the Wu family forces and city guards wait for the deadline to expire. Wu Tian shouts that he will give them only the time it takes for one incense stick to burn before they surrender. Once the deadline ends, he promises to exterminate anyone who continues resisting. From high above the estate, Yixuan listens to the threats with contempt. With a leap, he reaches the main rooftop. His silhouette appears before the moon at the top of the pavilion. Yixuan begins gathering all of his newly acquired energy. As he draws the bowstring, a powerful golden aura spreads around him. Looking down at Wu Tian, he challenges the old man to come up and face him personally. A glowing arrow tears through the air at incredible speed. Wu Tian watches the shot and mocks it as nothing more than a cheap trick. He creates a bluish barrier to block the attack, but his expression changes when the arrow pierces through the defense with almost no resistance. The shield shatters from the impact. The projectile passes only inches from Wu Tian's face and grazes his skin. Without stopping, it continues forward and strikes the warrior's position behind him. Furious after seeing his men wounded, Wu Tian promises to tear Yexuan apart. From the rooftop, the young man mockingly responds and introduces himself without showing any fear. Already preparing another arrow, he warns that he will continue taking down members of the Wu family until the old man comes up. Consumed by anger, Wu Tian admits that Yixuan is talented for someone at the 7th level, but accepts the challenge. He leaps toward the rooftop and promises to fulfill the young man's death wish. While the two confront each other above, the main gate collapses and the battle on the ground begins again. Yixuan's uncle leads the charge and orders the allied forces to advance. The warriors storm into the courtyard and clash with the Wu troops. Above them, Yixuan fires more energy shots to stop his opponent from approaching. Wu Tian appears in midair with his hands covered in flames. He descends with a powerful palm strike, trying to crush Yixuan against the rooftop. The impact destroys several roof tiles and spreads energy throughout the pavilion. Taking advantage of the opening, Wu Tian lands another strike and pushes Yixuan backward. During the exchange, Yixuan quickly glances down at the battlefield below. He notices that his uncle is in a dangerous position against the enemy warriors. Wu Tian notices the distraction and becomes furious at the young man's audacity to look away during their fight. Without wasting the opportunity, he bursts forward. His strike lands directly on Yixuan's chest. The young man coughs up blood and finally experiences the true strength of someone at the 8th level. Before he can react, Wu Tian brutally grabs him by the hair. With his other hand covered in flames, he prepares the finishing blow. At that moment, an incredibly fast slash cuts through the air toward the old man. Before anyone can even register the movement, Wu Tian's head is separated from his body. It falls and bounces across the stone floor. His body collapses as an unknown figure appears atop the structure. Yexuan watches in disbelief, unable to understand who just saved him. Wu Tian's head continues rolling until it finally comes to a stop. His eyes remain open, frozen in shock. A Wu family warrior is stunned after witnessing the leader's death. Desperate, he cries out for his father. He then looks toward the rooftop, trying to identify who is responsible. A man dressed in light-colored robes calmly watches everything from above. It is Lin Xiao, the respected ancestor of the Lin family. Overcome with rage, Wu Tian's son asks whether Lin Xiao was the one who killed his father. The ancestor calmly descends and confirms it without hesitation. He explains that Wu Tian was unlucky enough to attack the Lin family right after his breakthrough. If he had acted just 1 hour earlier, he might really have been able to take over Lin Yun. The Wu warrior is shocked and asks whether Lin Xiao has reached the 9th level of the martial path. Unable to accept it, he says his father always claimed it would be impossible to reach that stage at Lin Xiao's age. Lin Xiao admits that Wu Tian was right and reveals that he only managed to advance thanks to Senior Yu's guidance. He speaks respectfully about the expert and says that people at that level always have ways to overcome certain barriers. He then turns to the surviving members of the Wu family and offers to spare their lives if they surrender and destroy their own cultivation. Wu Tian's son repeats the condition in disbelief. A powerful reddish aura begins pouring from his body. Refusing to surrender, he charges forward in a desperate attempt to kill Lin Xiao. The ancestor responds with a single palm strike. The force of the attack crushes the man directly into the ground. He falls unconscious inside the crater created by the impact. His body remains motionless, ending any further resistance. After witnessing that, the remaining soldiers are paralyzed with fear. Yixuan simply watches the outcome. Without their main leaders, the Wu family warriors begin trembling. Wu Tian's death completely destroys the army's will to fight. Lin Xiao looks at the survivors and asks what they choose to do. With a stern gaze, he repeats that they can either abolish their own cultivation or die. One after another, weapons begin falling to the ground. Terrified, the warriors raise their hands and beg for mercy. Lin Xiao laughs in satisfaction at the mass surrender. He then orders his men to move in and collect the Wu family's wealth. The long night finally comes to an end, and peace returns to Lin Yun. The following morning, the Yi family garden is peaceful once again. Flower petals float across the warm water of a bathtub. Yixuan takes advantage of the rare moment of rest to bathe inside his quarters. As he relaxes, he thinks about how the system allows his cultivation to rise incredibly fast, but his physical body still needs to keep up with that growth. Wu Tian's attack made that painfully clear. His durability is still a weakness and needs to improve. Because of this, he decides to return to the Lianian Mountains soon to hunt 7th-ranked demonic beasts. Suddenly, Qing barges into the room while calling for him. Caught off guard, Yixuan sinks into the water and immediately tells her to get out. The girl crosses her arms and mockingly asks what he is so afraid of. She even laughs at the petals in his bath, and Yixuan irritably explains that he is using the plants to treat his internal injuries. Qing complains that he hid himself underwater, leaving Yixuan even more annoyed by her behavior. Changing the subject, she asks when he is finally going to take her to the Broken Clouds sect now that the enemies in the city have been eliminated. Yixuan asks her to be patient for a few more days. Qing does not like the answer and asks what still needs to be taken care of. He explains that he plans to make another trip to the Lianian Mountains first. Surprised, she asks whether he really intends to return there. Yixuan simply confirms it. His goal is still to become stronger as quickly as possible. Annoyed, Qing complains that all he ever thinks about is cultivating and that he never takes her anywhere for fun. To her surprise, Yixuan simply agrees with the accusation. He then warns her not to go out the next day because the men sent by her father will probably arrive soon. The news immediately infuriates Qing. Later, night falls over Lianian once again. Two riders race down a dark road at high speed. Yixuan and Qing travel together beneath the moonlight. The girl looks around as the two begin slowing down. She suggests stopping there for the night. Yixuan finds it strange since Qing had been in such a hurry to leave the city. She explains that she was only rushing because she was afraid her father's men would find her while she was still at the Yi residence. Now she feels much safer. Besides, she says that a noble young lady like her has no intention of sleeping outdoors. Yixuan takes the opportunity to ask why she is running away from the men her own father sent. Qing refuses to explain and even complains that he contacted her father behind her back. When they find an inn along the road, she walks ahead and asks the clerk for 2 rooms. As they cross the main hall, a man sitting at one of the tables begins discreetly watching them. Not noticing anything, Qing heads upstairs happily, relieved that she can finally sleep in a comfortable bed. The man watches the two with a sinister smile. His expression makes it clear that there is something suspicious about his interest in them. Several hours later, the night deepens beneath the full moon. The inn becomes completely silent. The owner leads Yixuan and Qing through the hallways toward their rooms. Cheerfully, she tells Yixuan to relax and promises to get them a good meal in the morning. He thanks Miss Xu, but already senses that something is not right. Silently, Yixuan begins evaluating the cultivators who are downstairs. The most dangerous man has reached the 7th level. His companions are at the 5th level and clearly do not look like practitioners from this region. For a moment, Yixuan considers whether they might be subordinates sent by Qing's father, but he quickly dismisses the possibility since she does not seem to recognize any of them. Standing outside her room, he tells Qing to sleep well because they plan to leave early the next morning. Pouting, she agrees and goes inside. Yixuan simply shakes his head at the girl's spoiled personality. During the night, the hallway becomes completely silent until a shadow appears outside Qing's door. The man presses his ear against the wood to check whether she has fallen asleep. No sound comes from inside. Qing sleeps deeply, completely unaware of what is happening. The intruder silently enters and begins approaching the bed. Sensing something wrong, the girl suddenly wakes up and is startled when she sees him. She immediately reacts with a kick. The man blocks the attack effortlessly and mocks her attempt. Qing instantly realizes that there is an enormous difference in strength between them. She tries to retreat and call for help, but the intruder is far too fast. A precise strike hits the back of her neck before she can scream. Qing loses consciousness and falls into the man's arms. He puts the girl inside a sack and carries her out of the inn. Soon afterward, the group escapes on horseback through the forest. They race through the darkness to avoid any possible pursuit. However, Yixuan watches everything from the rooftop and confirms that his suspicions were correct. Without wasting any time, he leaps into the darkness and begins following them. From the direction they are heading, he realizes they are going toward Wanjinqing. Yixuan believes that even if they were not directly sent by Qing's father, they probably have some connection to him. That means she should not be in immediate danger. Since Qing refused to return and would not explain why, Yixuan decides to uncover the truth himself. To do that, he needs to catch up with the group and force some answers out of them. Cutting through the mountains, he manages to position himself farther ahead along their route. Beneath the moonlight, Yixuan silently waits. It does not take long before the sound of galloping horses begins drawing closer. The men continue down the trail, unaware that someone is waiting for them. Suddenly, an attack cuts through the air and blocks their path. The leader's horse is struck and falls, forcing the man to leap away while carrying Qing. He manages to land without dropping the sack. The other subordinates are also knocked from their horses. Yixuan emerges from the shadows and demands to know who they are and why they took his friend. One of the men recognizes him and warns that he is the same young man from the inn. The leader smiles and admits that his instincts were right when he sensed that Yixuan was no ordinary person. One subordinate tries to mock him, saying that someone so young could hardly be much of a threat. The leader cuts him off and points out that the young man traveled more than 50 li on foot and still managed to catch up with horses moving at full speed. He then looks directly at Yixuan and asks who he really is. Before even receiving an answer, however, he changes his stance and smiles disdainfully. He says that he avoided causing trouble at the inn specifically because he did not want to start an unnecessary fight. Tired of the stalling, Yixuan releases his aura. If they refuse to answer peacefully, then he will force the answers out of them. Annoyed by the young man's attitude, the leader says he is courting death. Freezing energy begins gathering around his body. Their attacks collide and cause a massive explosion. The shockwave pushes both of them backward. Yeshuan regains his balance but notices that his hand has become covered in ice. One of the subordinates is astonished that he managed to confront their leader head-on. The other points out that his hand was struck by the flowing frost fist. Looking at the ice covering his fingers, Yeshuan recognizes it as a 7th grade martial art. The leader proudly confirms it and suggests that he leave before something worse happens to him. Yeshuan simply scoffs. To him, a mere 7th grade martial art is nothing worth being so proud of. Beneath the moon, the tension between the two continues to rise. Yeshuan faces the group without showing the slightest concern. With a smile, he reveals that he also knows techniques of that level. He mentally opens the system and exchanges his points for the wind and cloud palm. The superior 7th grade technique costs 30 devouring points. The subordinates begin laughing, thinking it is ridiculous for someone from a small city like Lian Yun to speak that way. Their laughter disappears when an enormous amount of golden energy explodes around Yeshuan. The leader and his men widen their eyes. Only then do they realize that the young man truly was not bluffing. The wind and cloud palm descends upon the group like a massive hurricane. The leader tries to raise his freezing energy to resist. However, his defense is shattered by the impact. The golden force overwhelms the area and engulfs the opponents. The subordinates panic. A massive explosion sends all of them flying. Injured on the ground, the men begin calling for help. The remaining whirlwind continues slamming them violently against the ground. When the dust settles, all three are completely defeated. Yeshuan begins approaching them. Thinking that he may have already left, two of the men whisper to each other that they should keep pretending to be dead. But the footsteps stop directly beside them. Coughing up blood, the leader admits that he severely underestimated Yeshuan. Yeshuan grabs him by the hair and asks why they kidnapped King Qing. Even after being defeated, the man refuses to answer and says Yeshuan can kill him if he wants. Losing patience, Yeshuan presses his head against the ground. He coldly remarks that the man really chose to be stubborn. He then turns toward the other two, who are still pretending to be dead. Yeshuan asks whether they also intend to act tough. The two begin trembling when he takes another step toward them. The young man asks whether they have decided what they are going to say to save their lives. One of them tries to answer but starts stuttering from fear. Yeshuan smiles and asks whether he would rather die right there. As if accepting that possibility, he begins gathering energy in his hand. The other subordinate panics and begs him to stop. He explains that his companion always stutters when he gets nervous and asks Yeshuan to be patient. Yeshuan remembers that the man was speaking perfectly well back at the inn. The man insists that his partner completely loses the ability to speak properly under pressure and tells him to try to calm down. Seeing no other option, the man kneels and promises to explain everything to save his companion. Finding their excessive concern for each other strange, Yeshuan asks whether they are a couple. The man blushes and confirms it, immediately irritating his partner. Determined to cooperate, he begins explaining everything starting from what happened 1 month earlier. That was when the young master of Wanjianqing first saw Qing Qing. The men served the city lord, and his son became obsessed with the girl. The young master asked for Qing Qing's hand in marriage, and her father accepted the proposal. But only a few days before the ceremony, she ran away without leaving any clues. When they discovered that Qing Qing was hiding with the Yi family, the city lord sent those men to bring her back. Yeshuan finally understands that she had been running away from an arranged marriage. Looking at Qing Qing sleeping peacefully, he is almost impressed by how carefree she remains even in the middle of such a situation. He then asks about the appearance, personality, and cultivation level of the young master who wants to marry her. The subordinate becomes upset and says his boss is a terrible person, spoiled and completely out of control. Blushing in embarrassment, he even hints that the young master once tried to take advantage of him. His companion immediately shakes him and tells him to stop talking nonsense and focus on what actually matters. The man apologizes and explains that Zhangshang is ugly, addicted to pleasure, and already has more than 10 concubines. Even so, he admits that Zhangshang is a 22-year-old genius, a 7th-rank cultivator, and a disciple of an influential sect. Yeshuan immediately becomes alert when he hears the name of the Liishan sect. After finishing their explanation, the two men embrace each other and beg to be released. With a mysterious smile, Yeshuan says he agrees to let them go. The pair sighs in relief, believing they will finally escape with their lives. But Yeshuan adds that they can only leave after killing their own leader. The following morning, sunlight shines over a beautiful traditional estate. Birds sing among the branches as the peaceful day begins. Waking up in a comfortable bed, Qing Qing stretches when she hears voices talking outside. Still confused, she looks around and realizes she is back in her own room. She tries to understand what happened since she clearly remembers falling asleep at the inn. Qing Qing is shocked, unable to understand how she returned to the family mansion. Hearing laughter coming from the garden, she decides to find out who is outside. She opens the window and anxiously looks toward the pavilion. To her surprise, she finds Yeshuan calmly drinking tea with her father and shouts his name. Without even putting on her shoes, Qing Qing furiously runs through the hallway. While Patriarch Xu asks about Yeshuan's next plans, the girl arrives and interrupts their conversation. Yeshuan turns around and greets her as if nothing happened. Qing Qing stomps over to him, ready to demand an explanation. Yeshuan feels the impact and looks at the girl in surprise. With her foot on him, Qing Qing furiously accuses him of betraying her. Her father intervenes and asks her to release Yeshuan, reminding her that he was the one who saved her. Surprised, Qing Qing listens as he explains that Yeshuan rescued her from the men who kidnapped her. The patriarch warns that she will no longer be allowed to go out alone, but Qing argues that everything happened because he tried to force her into marriage. Yahuan interrupts them and calmly asks her to finally take her foot off him. Only then does Qing realize the awkward position she is in. Her face turns completely red and she lets out an embarrassed scream. The girl quickly steps away and tries to apologize, saying she misunderstood everything. Her father explains that he never forced her to accept the marriage and that she herself agreed to the engagement. Embarrassed, Qing admits that she was distracted thinking about a picnic and did not even pay attention to what she was agreeing to. Yahuan is speechless and asks her to have at least a little common sense. Crossing her arms, Qing tells her own father to marry Zhang Xiang because she certainly has no intention of doing it. Patriarch Shu laughs awkwardly and apologizes to Yahuan for spoiling his daughter so much. He then reassures Qing by revealing that he has already ordered all the engagement gifts to be returned. Suspicious of the sudden change, she pinches her father's cheeks and asks whether he has been replaced by an imposter. At that moment, a guard comes running over and warns that the city lord has arrived looking for trouble. Before he can even finish speaking, the man is sent flying by an attack. Yahuan immediately becomes alert. Patriarch Shu takes a serious stance ready to protect his daughter. The city lord enters accompanied by his son and demands to know who dared to break the agreement. Looking at the newcomers, Yahuan recognizes the father and son of the Zhang family. The city lord of Wanjin has an extremely imposing presence. Zhang Shan's appearance, however, leaves Yahuan completely stunned. He even privately wonders whether that man can really be the son of the person standing beside him. Patriarch Shu confronts the city lord and complains about him invading his property like this. Zhang Xiang mocks him, saying that the entire city belongs to his family and that he can do whatever he wants. The atmosphere in the courtyard becomes increasingly tense. Yahuan looks at the city lord and asks whether he really approves of his son's behavior. The man responds only with an arrogant smile. He says he cannot control Zhang Xiang whenever his son gets angry and continues indulging him. Yahuan steps forward and reminds them that marriage should depend on the consent of both sides. The interference makes Zhang Xiang even more furious. He immediately concludes that Yichuan is responsible for canceling the engagement. Enraged, he charges straight at him. Qing and Patriarch Shu shout in concern at the attack. Yahuan, however, watches the charge with complete composure. With a confident smile, he uses his movement technique to step out of the attack's path. Zhang Xiang's punch hits nothing but air. In an instant, Yahuan appears above him ready to counter. A precise strike lands on Zhang Xiang's face and sends him flying away. The man violently skids across the ground, kicking up dust along the way. The city lord watches everything with a cold expression, unable to hide his fury. With a movement too fast to follow, he closes the distance. The man appears in front of them, unleashes a crushing pressure. His presence dominates the area as he demands that Yahuan release his son. Blue energy begins gathering in his hand, making his intentions perfectly clear. Consumed by rage, the city lord warns that no one hurts his son and gets away with it. Looking at Yahuan, he declares that such an insult can only be repaid with his life. Feeling that pressure up close, Yahuan realizes the enormous difference between their levels. He understands that he cannot fight the man head on and begins searching for a way out. At that moment, a powerful burst of energy passes right behind the city lord. Startled, he turns around and demands to know who dared to interfere. Everyone's attention shifts toward the wide courtyard of the Shu residence in Wanjinqing. Near the circular gate, a mysterious figure appears among the vegetation. The city lord stares at the newcomer and demands to know his identity. The masked man dressed in purple steps forward and declares that the Shu family is now under Lun Yun's protection. Zhang narrows his eyes as he realizes the situation has become more complicated. The masked man advises him to retreat and warns that his killing intent has already completely locked onto him. Realizing that the newcomer is a 9th-ranked martial artist, Zhang sarcastically comments on Patriarch Shu's hidden resources. Patriarch Shu responds with a forced smile that he simply did what was necessary to protect his family. The auras of the two experts clash, filling the courtyard with tension. Trying to settle the matter with money, Zhang demands 10 times the value of the engagement gifts in exchange for accepting the cancellation. Patriarch Shu considers the demand absurd since that would mean 500 million silver coins. He offers no more than 5 times the value and warns that if Zhang refuses, they can settle everything in a fight. Watching the negotiation, Yahuan laughs internally and thinks that he should have asked for more when he had the chance. After analyzing the situation, Zhang accepts 5 times the amount but also demands 5 kilometers of Shu family territory. He knows he cannot push too hard right now and prefers to accept the deal so he can take revenge later. Just when everything seems settled, Zhang Xiang gets up and presents one final condition. Pointing at Yahuan, he demands a 1-on-1 duel to settle their score. Patriarch Shu hesitates and looks at Yahuan, waiting for his decision. To everyone's surprise, he immediately accepts and says he will gladly teach the man some proper manners. Zhang Xiang becomes furious at his confidence and promises to beat him to death. Yahuan responds that someone who is 22 years old and still only at the 7th rank does not have much reason to think he is special. The provocation destroys what little patience Zhang Xiang has left, and he releases his aura before charging forward. forward. Using his movement technique, Yi Xuan avoids the attack and grabs his opponent's arm. However, Zhang Xiang barely moves, showing that his physical durability is not weak. At that moment, the man discreetly prepares a hidden trick. With a malicious smile, he waits to catch Yi Xuan off guard. The young man's eyes widen when he notices the trap. Zhang Xiang pulls out a hidden blade and tries to stab him at point-blank range. Qing Qing and Patriarch Xu shout when they notice the weapon. Yi Xuan, however, was already expecting some kind of dirty trick and activates his movement technique. He avoids the blade and appears beside Zhang Xiang. Before his opponent can continue, Yi Xuan locks his wrist. Channeling his strength, he twists the man's arm downward. The pressure on his wrist keeps increasing until the bones begin to give way. With a crack, Zhang Xiang's arm breaks, making him scream in pain. The scene shocks everyone, especially the city lord, who explodes with rage after seeing his son injured. Zhang releases his full aura and leaps forward, consumed by the desire for revenge. Charging at Yi Xuan, he promises to destroy his cultivation right there. Realizing that the attack could kill him, the masked man moves to interfere. He appears in front of Yi Xuan and blocks the charge with his bare hand. The collision between the two experts causes a massive explosion in the courtyard. Remaining calm, the masked man advises Zhang to take his son away and treat his arm before the damage gets worse. Unable to get past the man, the city lord can only clench his fists and suppress his anger. Before leaving, he stares at Yi Xuan and asks for his name. Showing no fear, the young man answers that he is Yi Xuan of the Yi family. Qing Qing quickly adds that he is the direct disciple of the master of the Broken Cloud sect. Yi Xuan is completely speechless at the ridiculous lie she just invented. Believing the story, the city lord concludes that the Shu family really has found a powerful protector. He picks up his injured son and leaves, warning Yi Xuan to pray that his luck continues. As the Zhangs leave, the tension in the courtyard finally begins to fade. The masked man, however, becomes curious about the story Qing Qing just told about the sect master. Later, everyone gathers once again in the courtyard of the Shu residence. Deep in thought, the masked man tries to understand why Qing Qing invented such a risky lie. Embarrassed, she admits that she only lied to scare their enemies, but reminds him that he is also an instructor from the same sect. Patriarch Xu approaches and sincerely thanks the masked man for interfering at exactly the right moment. The man replies that he only did what needed to be done. The patriarch, however, is still worried. After injuring the Zhang family, the Xu family's businesses will certainly be affected. The masked man tries to reassure him and suggests that they maintain the story about Yi Xuan being the disciple of a great expert from the sect. Qing Qing panics and admits that she made the whole thing up on the spot. With a clever look, the masked man suggests a simple solution: turn the lie into the truth. Yi Xuan narrows his eyes and asks exactly what he means. The man explains that if Yi Xuan distinguishes himself within the Broken Cloud sect, one of its great leaders will surely become interested in accepting him. Confidently, Yi Xuan smiles and reveals that he was already planning to head to the sect within the next few days. Relieved, Patriarch Xu orders a grand banquet to be prepared for the celebration. Later, night falls over Wanjinqing. Inside his room, Yi Xuan receives a visit from Patriarch Xu and asks why he came so late. The old man sits down and explains that because of his friendship with Yi Xuan's father, he has always considered him part of the family. While pouring the tea, Yi Xuan jokingly reminds him that their friendship began because his father saved the patriarch's life. The old man smiles and changes the subject, asking what Yi Xuan thinks of Qing Qing. Yi Xuan says she is sweet, sincere, and fun, although she could be a little more reliable. The patriarch becomes excited and immediately suggests that he marry her, making Yi Xuan spit out his tea. Coughing, the young man explains that he has always seen Qing Qing as a younger sister. The old man begins acting dramatically, pretending to be offended that Yi Xuan is rejecting the daughter of such a wealthy man. He then laughs and says he has no intention of forcing him, but once again expresses his gratitude for everything Yi Xuan has done for the family. Afterward, he calls the servants and orders them to bring Yi Xuan's reward. The young man's eyes light up when he hears the word reward. Several chests are opened, revealing spiritual crystals, gold, and other resources. The patriarch gives him everything as thanks and reminds him that resources are essential for any cultivator. Yi Xuan picks up a wooden box among the gifts and opens it to inspect the contents. Inside, he finds rare black spiritual mushrooms formed from mutated blood mushrooms. Surprised by their rarity, Yi Xuan comments that they are far too valuable to be treated as a simple gift. The patriarch merely waves his hand and says they are not that expensive to him. Yi Xuan nearly loses his mind internally after seeing the millionaire treat an item worth 50 million as if it were nothing. The old man sighs, praises the way Yi Xuan was raised by his father, and once again laments that he does not want to marry Qing Qing. Changing the subject, Yi Xuan asks how much the patriarch actually knows about his father's past. The man admits that he knows very little because Yi Chong was always extremely reserved and almost only showed happiness when he was with his son. Looking into the distance, he recalls that he would probably be dead if Yi Chong had not saved his life. He explains that 4 years earlier, his caravan was surrounded by dangerous bandits in the Lianian Mountains. When the situation seemed hopeless, a mysterious swordsman carrying a baby appeared and defeated all of them by himself. That man was Yi Chong, and the baby in his arms was Yi Xuan. That was how their friendship began. Curious, the patriarch asks why Yi Xuan has never questioned Yi Zhang about his father's past. Yi Xuan explains that Yi Zhang always avoids the subject and acts as though Yi Chong is already dead. The patriarch immediately rejects that possibility, saying Yi Chong's cultivation was far too high for him to die easily. When Yixuan asks what his true level was, the old man admits that he does not remember exactly. However, the bandits he defeated were rebels wanted by the Xuanning Empire. Their leader was a former general who had already reached the intermediate stage of the true profound realm. After their conversation, the patriarch says goodbye and wishes him a good night before leaving the room. Once the door closes, Yixuan is finally alone to process everything he just learned. Thinking about the difference in power, he concludes that someone like that former general probably would not have been able to withstand his father. Even so, Yezheng's reluctance to discuss the past makes Yixuan even more suspicious. Determined to keep getting stronger, he activates the devouring hand and begins absorbing the resources he received. As he does, he wonders whether his father disappearing when he was still a baby might somehow be connected to his mother. The system confirms the absorption of the resources and records another advancement within the 7th stage. But Yixuan nearly loses his mind when he realizes he spent more than 200 million worth of resources just to make that single advancement. The next morning, he says goodbye to the Zhu family and leaves to continue his journey. Using a new shadow step technique, Yixuan races down the road at high speed. A farmer passing nearby is nearly knocked over by the gust of wind and has no idea what just happened. Testing the ability, Yixuan realizes that the new steps are far superior to the techniques he used before. Besides being faster, the movement is also much smoother. Thinking about his next objectives, he remembers that he needs to hunt 7th rank beasts to complete the bloodline of 100 beasts. To save time, he decides to cross the mountains while hunting on his way toward the Broken Clouds sect. Yixuan enters the forest and begins a long series of hunts. First, he defeats a flaming tiger, causing the system to record progress toward the bloodline. Next, he takes down a massive rock turtle and absorbs its essence. In another battle, he cuts through several bloodthirsty vines and continues accumulating progress. Farther ahead, he brings a crimson eagle down from the sky, raising the activation bar to 99%. To complete the hunt, Yixuan faces a massive gorilla and lands a fatal strike on its chest. The beast collapses to the ground, ending the final battle. Sweaty and exhausted after so many fights, Yixuan stops for a few moments to catch his breath. Looking at the corpse in front of him, he lets out a sigh of relief at finally reaching the end. Checking the system, he realizes it took 7 full days of hunting to reach the required amount. Without wasting any time, he places his hand on the monster and absorbs the rest of its essence. The bar finally reaches 100%, and the bloodline of 100 beasts begins to awaken. Yixuan's eyes glow golden as tremendous power begins surging within his body. The energy flows through his meridians and deeply strengthens his physical body. Time passes as the sun disappears behind the mountains. The following morning, the first rays of sunlight illuminate the entrance of an isolated cave. Inside, Yixuan wakes up with his clothes torn after going through the transformation process. He clenches his fist and immediately notices an enormous difference in the density of his muscles. To test it, he throws a single punch at the rock wall, creating a shockwave that makes the entire cave tremble. The wall becomes covered in cracks and holes, showing just how much his physical strength has increased. Impressed, Yixuan confirms that his strength, speed, and durability have all improved significantly. After the battles of the past several days, he also realizes that he has reached the peak of the 7th stage. Confidently, he calculates that even someone at the 8th stage would have difficulty surviving 10 of his punches without a weapon. Even so, another problem remains: his regeneration is still slow after prolonged battles. Yixuan opens the system shop and enters the low-level bloodline section looking for a solution. Several options appear, including abilities focused on combat, poison resistance, and recovery. After comparing the alternatives, he chooses the bloodline of 100 flowers to improve his healing ability. Satisfied with his choice, he confirms the exchange. The system deducts 360 devouring points. A golden light surrounds his body while Yixuan nearly cries after seeing almost all his points disappear once again. Within seconds, the small cuts and wounds on his face begin healing on their own. Seeing the recovery work so quickly, he concludes that the investment was worth it. After that, he continues through the forest and decides that he has delayed his arrival at the Broken Clouds sect long enough. After traveling for some more time, he finally sees enormous structures built high atop a mountain. Approaching the massive carved wooden gate, Yixuan takes in the grandeur of the place. He remembers that this is one of the 2 most influential sects in the entire Nanling region. As he approaches the gate, an outer disciple notices him and asks what he wants. Yixuan politely replies that he has come to report to the sect. Seeing his torn clothes, the disciple becomes suspicious and asks whether he has the necessary documents or if he was robbed along the way. Slightly embarrassed, Yixuan brushes off the question and thinks that he should start keeping extra clothes in his dimensional space. He then takes out his recruitment token and hands it to the young man. The disciple examines the object and is surprised to confirm that it really is an official token. While they are talking, heavy footsteps begin approaching through the courtyard. The young gatekeeper turns around and respectfully greets a veteran disciple who has just arrived. The veteran looks Yixuan up and down and sees nothing but a ragged young man. Full of arrogance, he asks why the gatekeeper has not thrown that beggar out yet. The outer disciple tries to explain and shows him the token, saying Yixuan officially came to report to the sect. The veteran refuses to listen and slaps the young man on the head, refusing to believe him. Yixuan watches silently, but his gaze becomes increasingly cold. The man continues holding the gatekeeper by the head and orders him to throw the supposed beggar out. Before the situation gets worse, light footsteps echo across the courtyard. A beautiful young woman dressed in purple appears and orders the veteran to stop bullying the outer disciples. His attitude immediately changes, challenges, and the man tries to justify himself by saying he was only teaching the newcomers a lesson. Beside the girl, a red-haired disciple asks why the veteran is still wasting his time there. Discreetly observing the young woman, Yixuan notices that she has already reached the peak of the 7th stage. The red-haired young man beside her has also reached the intermediate stage of the 7th level. Yixuan smiles after finding so many strong cultivators gathered right at the entrance and acknowledges the sect's high standard. To him, finding stronger opponents only makes the place more interesting. Sensing the pressure coming from the poorly dressed young man, the woman in purple is surprised by his aura. The red-haired disciple and the other veteran also notice that the atmosphere has changed. Trying to regain his authority, the first man once again orders the gatekeeper to throw Yixuan out. Losing patience, Yixuan steps forward and asks whether he is deaf. Offended, the veteran gathers energy in his hand and attacks him. His palm strike hits nothing because Yixuan dodges with ease. The woman in purple follows the movement and realizes that this supposed beggar is also an expert at the 7th stage. Yixuan counters with a direct punch to the veteran's stomach. The force of the impact sends the man flying backward. He crashes through the courtyard railing and is thrown toward the abyss. The girl, the gatekeeper, and the red-haired disciple are completely stunned. Falling toward the rocks below, the veteran panics and begins screaming for help. The abyss is deep enough that the fall would certainly kill him. Calmly, Yixuan leans over the broken railing and grabs the man by his clothes before he can fall. The man begs to be pulled up, but Yixuan pretends he cannot hear him because of the wind. Terrified, the veteran cries, apologizes, and begs to be saved. Yixuan finally pulls him back up and throws him onto the ground in front of the others. Furious over his companion's humiliation, the red-haired disciple steps forward with anger in his eyes. He accuses Yixuan of being an infiltrating spy, while the young gatekeeper tries to stop the situation from getting worse. The young man shows the recruitment token again to prove that Yixuan is not an intruder. The red-haired disciple snatches the token from his hands to examine it, but his smile makes it clear that he has no real interest in verifying anything. He closes his hand and crushes the token into several pieces. The woman in purple and Yixuan watch his actions with obvious anger. The red-haired disciple grabs the young gatekeeper by the collar and declares that Yixuan is an enemy who nearly killed one of the sect's disciples. The first veteran recovers, and the two release their auras to attack together. The girl tries to stop the conflict and suggests taking the matter to Elder Gong to confirm Yixuan's registration. The men ignore her suggestion and charge forward, claiming they will capture him by force. Yixuan smiles coldly when he realizes that the two are clearly trying to frame him. The veterans attack simultaneously with palm strikes and order him to surrender. In an instant, Yixuan disappears from in front of them. A golden streak crosses the space between them too quickly to follow. Appearing behind the pair, Yixuan grabs their heads and slams them together. The woman in purple watches everything and realizes that even together, those two cannot keep up with him. Yixuan then looks at the young gatekeeper and jokes that he actually let those men destroy his token. At that moment, a stern voice echoes through the courtyard and orders everyone to stop. Elder Gong appears and demands to know what is happening. Pretending to be innocent, Yixuan explains that he came to report to the sect that the two veterans simply wanted to test his strength in a friendly spar. The elder examines Yixuan and recognizes him as the young man recruited from Lianyan City. Yixuan calmly confirms his identity. To his surprise, Elder Gong becomes furious and begins reprimanding him, believing that he took dangerous elixirs to accelerate his cultivation. Yixuan is completely confused, unable to understand where that conclusion came from. The old man says he understands the difficulties facing the Yi family, but regrets that the young man risked his own future in exchange for rapid strength. Angered by what he believes was Yixuan's choice, he orders him to start in the outer sect and train there to stabilize what he assumes is superficial strength. The young gatekeeper becomes excited and pulls Yixuan by the arm, inviting him to follow. As he is dragged away, Yixuan protests that there is absolutely nothing superficial about his strength. Elder Gong watches the two leave and shakes his head, lamenting what he believes to be the waste of a great talent. He then looks at the two fallen veterans and fails them in that month's evaluation for getting beaten so badly. He orders the two to stop complaining and return to cultivating as the sun begins to disappear behind the mountains. Following a stone path, the young gatekeeper leads Yixuan toward the outer disciple area. Noticing the injuries he suffered earlier, Yixuan hands him a bottle of healing elixir. The boy tries to refuse, saying they are only minor wounds and that the medicine is far too valuable. Yixuan forces the bottle into his hands and says he has plenty more, leaving the young man impressed by his wealth. Curious, he asks whether the boy is often treated that way. The young man replies that he is already used to it. Yixuan smiles and assures him that from now on, no one be allowed to bully him while he is around. The boy introduces himself as Nuer and says his family lives in a village at the foot of the mountain. Impressed by Yixuan's strength, Nuer reveals that his dream since childhood has been to become strong enough to protect his mother. Yixuan pats his head and encourages him, assuring him that one day he will achieve that dream. Changing the subject, Yixuan becomes serious and asks Nuer about the fastest way to become famous within the sect. The young gatekeeper finds the question strange and does not understand why he wants so much attention. Xuan explains more clearly his goal is to be noticed by the elders or even by the sect master himself. Newer becomes excited and explains that the best way is to earn 10 consecutive victories in the combat arena. Interested, Xuan asks whether any disciple has ever accomplished that. Newer reveals that Senior Meng won 10 times in a row, was accepted by the vice leader, and became #1. Talking along the way, the two cross the bamboo forest until they reach a small wooden house. Newer announces that he has brought a new disciple to register under Elder Gong's orders. Outside, an old man with a long beard rests in a rocking chair with a book covering his face. Showing little enthusiasm, he yawns and asks only for the newcomer's name, origin, and cultivation level. Xuan introduces himself as a member of the Yi family from Lianyun and reveals that he is at the peak of the 7th stage. The old man nearly falls out of his chair and asks whether he really intends to stay in the outer sect with cultivation like that. Newer excitedly adds that Xuan just beat up veterans Ning and Lu at the entrance. Regaining his composure, the elder records the information and comments that those two losing is hardly surprising. Curious, Xuan asks whether those two arrogant disciples have any important backing within the sect. Newer quietly replies that veteran Lu is the grandson of the influential elder Lu. The registration elder ignores their conversation, gathers energy into his brush, and engraves the information onto a wooden plaque. He then hands over a key and says room 19 in block T is just around the corner. The two head there, but Xuan grows increasingly quiet as they approach. To his complete disappointment, room 19 turns out to be nothing more than a cabin practically falling apart. Xuan grabs his head in despair and decides to go straight to the arena. Newer asks whether he does not at least want to go inside and look around. Turning away without hesitation, Xuan replies that there is absolutely no need. Internally, he completely refuses to live in that miserable shack. As night falls, the scene shifts to the bustling combat arena of the outer sect. Several disciples duel throughout the courtyard to test their martial arts. Suddenly, Newer strikes a massive gong with all his strength. The loud crash catches everyone's attention, and they immediately look toward the platform. In the center of the arena, Xuan appears surrounded by his aura while the disciples try to figure out who this newcomer is. He stands confidently in the ring, with Newer holding the gong mallet beside him. A veteran in the crowd becomes annoyed and asks Newer where he found that show-off beggar. Newer excitedly replies that Xuan is about to begin the challenge of 10 consecutive victories. The crowd begins booing, thinking it is ridiculous for a newcomer to act so arrogantly on his very first day. Some disciples encourage veteran Li to enter the ring and put Xuan in his place. Li enters the arena with an intimidating smile and challenges the newcomer. Xuan merely laughs and says he looks far too weak to be worth his time. Furious, Li charges forward with a flame-covered fist and tells the young man to pay attention. Xuan dodges almost too quickly to be seen and counters with a single punch to the chest. The crowd is stunned to see a 5th-level cultivator defeated instantly. While everyone begins calling for Senior Yu, the strongest warrior of the outer sect finally appears. The man laughs confidently and says he has waited 3 years for someone to try taking the #1 position from him. Before he can do much more, an explosion of energy fills the arena as Xuan attacks. Senior Yu falls unconscious and bleeding while Xuan comments that his presence was impressive, but not enough. He then tells Newer to strike the gong again. Looking increasingly excited, Xuan demands that the challenge continue. Newer obeys and strikes the massive bronze gong once again. The sound spreads across the sect's mountains as the sun disappears over the horizon. The echo reaches the higher sectors and catches the attention of two intersect disciples. They comment that this is already the 3rd gong in an absurdly short amount of time. One veteran stretches and claims he could fight the entire outer sect by himself. Before he finishes speaking, the 4th gong echoes across the mountains. Intrigued by so many consecutive victories, he decides to head to the arena and find out what is happening. Down below, several defeated disciples watch with desperate expressions. The crowd comments in shock that even an intersect veteran was defeated with only 1 punch. One student complains, unable to understand why they placed a monster of that level in the outer area. The old registration elder appears among the crowd with a suspicious smile, saying he knows the answer. The disciples immediately surround him and demand that he reveal the secret. Without the slightest shame, the elder holds out his hand and charges them for the information. After collecting the coins, he reveals that the newcomer is named Xuan and that he already beat up 2 veterans at the gate. The crowd does the math and concludes that he must be at least at the 7th stage. Inside the arena, Xuan lands another blow and sends another challenger flying out of the ring. Soon afterward, a new opponent steps up and promises to defeat him. The crowd begins cheering for Senior Zong, hoping they will finally see the newcomer lose. Xuan counters with an upward punch and sends Zong flying into the air. The man falls unconscious while a girl in the crowd laments his humiliation. Beginning to lose patience, Xuan wonders why the vice leader's disciple still has not appeared. He concludes that he will need to cause even more trouble to attract the attention of someone who actually matters. Spreading his arms, he challenges everyone present to enter the ring and try to defeat him. The entire arena falls silent at such an outrageous provocation. Seconds later, the courtyard erupts in anger, with everyone complaining that leader Meng is not there to put him in his place. The disciples accuse Xuan of showing off specifically because the strongest warrior is absent. To Too angry to keep talking, several of them attack at the same time. An entire crowd leaps onto the platform, trying to overwhelm him with numbers. The result is disastrous. Dozens of disciples are sent flying almost simultaneously. High atop a pagoda in the inner sect, news of the commotion finally reaches the masters. While playing Go, a white-bearded elder moves a piece and comments on the strange newcomer. He asks whether that is the same young man Elder Gong classified as someone with superficial strength. Gong scratches his beard, visibly embarrassed as he watches Yixuan's performance. A muscular elder sitting nearby praises the young man for sweeping through the outer sect despite being only at the peak of the 7th stage. Impressed by his talent, one of the masters decides that he wants to accept him as a disciple. The muscular elder immediately protests, warning that no one is stealing that newcomer from him. Before the argument can continue, a much more powerful presence appears in the area. A beam of light crosses the sky toward the arena, causing the old men to react to the movement. Inside the ring, Yixuan continues smiling and challenges any other disciple to step forward. The crowd remains completely speechless. Then an elder descends from the sky like a meteor and attacks Yixuan directly. Without hesitation, the young man punches upward and collides with the master's palm. The impact causes an explosion of energy that illuminates the entire arena. The elder is pushed backward and has to slide across the ground to regain his balance. Bai Lai looks at his own hands, still tingling from the impact, and is impressed by the young man's strength. Looking carefully at Yixuan, he asks whether he has trained hard since childhood. The young man simply smiles and comments that the old man's attack was not bad either. Bai Lai introduces himself as the law enforcement elder and offers to accept Yixuan as his direct disciple. Before Yixuan can answer, another elder appears and interrupts the offer, mocking Bai Lai's techniques. The newcomer introduces himself as the elder responsible for teaching and promises that Yixuan can learn every martial art in the sect under him. The two begin arguing in the middle of the arena over which one of them has the better techniques. Yixuan watches the ridiculous argument without quite knowing how to react. Taking advantage of the distraction, the muscular elder quietly approaches him and tries to win him over with monthly points in a 9th grade technique. The teaching elder notices the bribe and complains that he should have priority because he made his offer first. The muscular elder loses his patience and suggests settling everything with a fight to decide who gets Yixuan. The three masters glare at each other as threatening auras rise around them. Seconds later, a full-blown brawl breaks out, raising a massive cloud of dust in the middle of the arena. The disciples can only watch the scene, completely speechless. Yixuan becomes annoyed when he realizes that no one has even asked who he actually wants to choose. Then a powerful voice echoes from the sky, reprimanding them for making such a ridiculous scene. The vice leader appears and grabs the three fighting elders, finally restoring order. With a stern expression, he scolds the masters for humiliating themselves in front of all the disciples. The three immediately bow and respectfully greet their superior. Yixuan smiles internally. His plan finally worked, and the person he wanted to attract has appeared. The vice leader looks at him and asks whether he is really responsible for all this commotion and how old he is. Yixuan bows politely and replies that he is only 15 years old. The old man's expression immediately changes as he carefully studies the young man. Yixuan notices the strange look and starts wondering what he is thinking. Ignoring the other elders, the vice leader directly asks whether Yixuan would like to become his disciple. The three masters panic and beg him to leave at least one talent of this level for them. The vice leader maintains a serious expression and says his life is already approaching its end, so he needs to prepare a successor. He claims that he wants to lead the sect to the top of the region, while the other three quietly mutter that they have heard that excuse before. To make the offer even better, he promises 2,000 points every month and access to the sect's martial arts. Yixuan remains silent, calculating the value of all those benefits. The vice leader also reveals that he possesses a secret recipe capable of increasing physical strength tenfold. That is enough for Yixuan to perform a formal salute and accept the man as his master. Satisfied, the old man laughs and says that from now on, Yixuan will live in his private courtyard and receive personal instruction. With everything settled, he tells his new disciple to follow him back to his residence. The following morning, mist covers the mountains, making the sect's scenery look even more magnificent. Yixuan and his master climb a long stone staircase. At the top of the mountain stands an isolated residence surrounded by dense vegetation. When they reach the courtyard, the old man shows him around and says this will be Yixuan's new home. Right afterward, he explains that he needs to travel for anywhere from 3 months to half a year. To make sure no one questions the young man's position, he gives him an official identity token. He also says that he already arranged 3 months' worth of points in advance so Yixuan can settle in without worrying. Curious about the sudden trip, the young man asks where he intends to go. His master explains that he promised to prepare a body-strengthening recipe, but some of the required herbs cannot be found within the sect and must be collected personally. Before leaving, he says that his only other disciple, senior sister Guan Yulin, lives next door and can help if Yixuan needs anything. Yixuan confirms that he understands. Without wasting any more time, the old man says goodbye and follows the trail through the bamboo forest. Watching his master leave, Yixuan smiles in satisfaction at finally finding someone genuinely willing to help him. Later, the scene returns to the outer disciple's residential area. Nior is chopping wood when he hears someone calling his name. He immediately stops and turns around in surprise. To his delight, Yixuan appears walking calmly toward him. Nior asks why he came back to the outer area, and Yixuan replies that he only needs to clear up one question. He wants to know where disciples can exchange contribution points for medicinal materials. Nior explains that this is done at the alchemy pavilion and offers to take him there. The two follow the mountain paths together. Nior enthusiastically leads the way. Soon afterward, they arrive in front of an imposing building. The sign at the entrance confirms that it is the alchemy pavilion. Yixuan enters to see what resources are available. Behind the counter, the disciple in charge is busy filling out some records. When he notices Yixuan, he smiles and asks whether he came to exchange points for materials. Yixuan admits that he does not even know how many points he has yet. The attendant explains that the vice leader already left instructions and that Yixuan has a limit of 6,000 points to spend. Interested, Yixuan asks what herbs are available. The young man places a large catalog on the counter and explains that every page lists each material's properties, age, uses, and price. Flipping through the book while Nior peeks over his shoulder, Yixuan realizes the sect possesses rare resources that almost never appear on the market. Slightly embarrassed, the attendant says there is another catalog containing more ordinary items, but he thought it was better not to bother bringing it out. Noticing the flattery, Yixuan smiles and remarks that the young man certainly knows how to treat his customers well. The attendant continues praising Yixuan and says someone of his level deserves only top-quality materials. Nior cannot hold back and calls the man a suck upright to his face, leaving him embarrassed. After studying the catalog, Yixuan chooses the blood dragon herb, ice whisker root, and cloudness vine, spending exactly all of his points. The attendant asks him to wait while he retrieves everything from storage. Nior stares at the resources with shining eyes and begins imagining the day he can also save enough points to buy treasures like those. Yixuan notices the boy's excitement. Laughing, he messes up his hair and praises his ambition while Nior jokingly complains. Soon afterward, the attendant returns carrying several wooden boxes. He places everything on the counter and confirms that he brought exactly the requested materials. Yixuan thanks him and immediately activates the devouring hand on the first resource. The system appears and shows that his progress toward the next breakthrough has reached 73%. Since there is still quite a bit left, he immediately prepares to absorb the rest. Yixuan touches the second box and devours more than 10,000 points of spiritual energy. However, the progress bar stops at exactly 99%. Internally, Yixuan nearly explodes when he realizes he consumed resources worth 80 million coins and still failed to reach the 8th level. Stuck just one step away from his breakthrough, he concludes that he needs to earn more points as quickly as possible. Nior notices his strange expression and waves a hand in front of his face. Worried, he asks whether something happened. Yixuan snaps out of it, hides his frustration, and says everything is fine. The two leave the alchemy pavilion and continue through the sect. Along the way, Yixuan asks about the fastest way to earn points. Nior replies that the best place is the training pavilion, where disciples accept missions in exchange for rewards. He points toward a nearby mountain, where a large red building can be seen. Yixuan looks at the place from a distance and confirms that he understands. Before they separate, he takes out a 4th order finger/manual and lightly taps Nior on the head with it, telling him to practice. He then says that once Nior's cultivation improves, no one will dare bully him anymore. Holding the manual emotionally, Nior thinks about how well Brother Yi has treated him. Soon afterward, Yixuan arrives at the imposing training pavilion. The sign at the entrance confirms that this is the building where the sect's missions are posted. Inside, dozens of disciples are gathered around the large mission board. Yixuan enters and realizes the place is completely packed. As soon as they recognize him, several disciples begin looking in his direction. To his surprise, everyone bows and greets him at the same time. Slightly embarrassed by the reception, Yixuan tells them to continue what they were doing and even wonders whether he entered the right building. He walks over to the board and turns his attention back to his real objective. While examining the missions, several girls nearby whisper to each other and praise his appearance. Among the available tasks, Yixuan finds missions from the 5th to 7th order, including one to eliminate the bandits of Blackwater Mountain in exchange for 700 points. Since there are no 8th order missions, this is the most difficult one available. The bandit leader is at the peak of the 7th level, so Yixuan believes he will not need many strikes to defeat him. Even though he thinks 700 points is rather low, he assumes a bandit hideout probably contains extra treasures. Without hesitation, he removes the mission from the board. When he hands the mission slip over for registration, a voice behind him tells him to wait. Yixuan calmly turns around to see who decided to interrupt him. The disciples begin whispering when senior brother Lu appears with his group and Guan Yulin. Yixuan glances sideways and calmly asks what they want. A blonde disciple points at the mission and demands that he give it up, saying their group had already been watching it. The crowd is surprised to realize that they really came to take the mission by force. Yixuan laughs and remarks that he has seen people steal money and even people before, but never a mission. With a smile, he makes it clear that he has no intention of giving it up. The blonde disciple tries to step forward, but Lu grabs his shoulder and tells him to control himself. Maintaining a friendly tone, Lu asks whether Yixuan really intends to complete that mission alone. The young man replies that he does. Lu says he admires his courage and ability. However, he warns that Tao Hu is at the peak of the 7th level and can fight alongside 2 other experts. Pretending to be concerned, he says he is worried Yixuan might be surrounded by all 3. He then proposes that they form a group since they are fellow disciples of the same sect. Understanding his intention, Yixuan agrees to consider the idea but demands 70% of the points in any loot they find. He leaves the remaining 30% to be divided among the other 3. and he makes it clear that those are the only terms under which he will participate. The blonde disciple immediately protests, asking why Yixuan should receive so much. To his surprise, Lu accepts immediately, only insisting that Yixuan be responsible for fighting Cao Hu. The blonde disciple tries to complain again, but Lu tells him to shut up. Guan Yulin watches everything in silence, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. Yixuan finds it suspicious that Lu accepted such an unfavorable split so easily and begins suspecting a trap. Judging by the group's behavior, he is certain there is some hidden intention behind their friendliness. Studying Lu more carefully, he realizes that the man is far more calculating than he appears. Instead of becoming worried, Yixuan smiles, thinking the mission just became much more interesting. Without revealing his suspicions, he accepts the partnership and asks them to explain the details along the way. The scene shifts to birds flying over mist-covered mountains. Near their destination, Guan Yulin points from the top of a hill toward the bandits' headyacht in the valley. She explains that the group raided a village 7 days earlier and took several civilians prisoner. Besides eliminating the criminals, they also need to rescue those people. She then asks Lu what the plan is. Lu looks at Yixuan and asks whether he can hold off the 3 leaders for the time it takes to drink a cup of tea. Yixuan immediately understands they want him to draw out the leaders while the others circle the mountain and attack everyone else. Lu confirms with a smile that this is exactly his idea. Guan Yulin protests, saying that leaving Yixuan alone against 3 7th-level cultivators is far too dangerous. From her reaction, Yixuan realizes that Guan Yulin is not part of the others' hidden plan. That only makes the entire situation more amusing to him. The blonde disciple provokes him, reminding Yixuan he became famous for defeating a crowd of disciples and that 3 opponents should not be a problem. With a malicious smile, he asks whether Yixuan agrees. Yixuan calmly replies that he has no problem with it but adds one thing. Curious, the blonde disciple asks what he means. Yixuan smiles and says they do not even need to get involved. He plans to wipe out all the bandits himself. Below them, the Blackwater Mountain camp occupies a large section of the valley. Without wasting any time, Yixuan punches the trunk of a massive tree. Lu, Guan Yulin, and the blonde disciple are stunned by the display of strength. Yixuan tears the trunk free and launches it through the air. The massive log flies like a projectile and smashes through the camp's gate. Guan Yulin begins coughing from the dust and tries to understand what he is planning. Yixuan calmly walks through the smoke. When Guan Yulin can finally see clearly again, she freezes at the next sight. Yixuan appears carrying another gigantic tree trunk over his shoulders. With a smile, he remarks that walking all the way up and down the mountain is far too troublesome. He digs his fingers into the wood to secure his grip. Then he jumps off the cliff while carrying the enormous log. The blonde disciple shouts in disbelief at what he is seeing. Already airborne, Yixuan says no one needs to ask what he is doing. Using the trunk as support, he announces that he decided to take a shortcut through the air. Lu and the blonde disciple are completely speechless at the insanity. Descending toward the camp, Yixuan shouts for the leader, Cao Hu, and he warns that the king of hell has sent someone to collect him. Inside the base, the bandits panic when they see something enormous falling from the sky. High on the cliff, Guan Yulin asks in disbelief whether Yixuan always acts like this. Still trying to understand the provocation, she even asks who this king of hell is supposed to be. The log crashes into the camp with a thunderous impact and destroys everything in its path. When the dust settles, Yixuan appears perfectly balanced on top of the wood. Furious, the 3 bandit leaders emerge and demand to know who destroyed their gate. From atop the log, Yixuan introduces himself and announces that he came to wipe them all out. Cao Shu, the 3rd leader, mocks him and calls Yixuan a clueless rookie. Without wasting any time, he prepares his bow to teach the intruder a lesson. Gathering energy into the arrow, he accuses Yixuan of overestimating his own strength. Cao Shu fires directly at his head. Even while watching the projectile approach, Yixuan does not move. At the last moment, he extends a hand covered in golden energy. He catches the arrow effortlessly and asks whether Cao Shu really chose to play with bows against him. With a quick movement, Yixuan takes the bandit's bow. Drawing the string and surrounding the weapon with his own energy, he asks whether Cao Shu thought he was the only one there who knew how to shoot. He then unleashes a massive barrage of glowing projectiles. Cao Shu's eyes widen when he sees the rain of energy coming directly toward him. At the last second, he realizes there is no escape. The attack strikes him head on and eliminates him before he can defend himself. Cao Hu and Cao Bao shout for their brother when they see him fall dead. Consumed by rage, Cao Bao draws a lightning-covered blade and charges toward Yixuan. Leaping through the air, he descends while trying to cut the young man in half. Yixuan remains calm even with the blade coming straight toward his head. The strike destroys the wooden structure, but Yixuan escapes easily. With a light jump, he retreats and lands on the roof of a nearby building. Surrounded by his aura, he smiles at Cao Bao's frustration. Without giving his enemies any rest, he prepares the bow again and activates a rain of arrows. Several golden beams begin falling from the sky like meteors over the camp. Cao Hu looks upward and immediately realizes the scale of the danger. Cao Bao is struck directly by the rain of light and dies in the middle of the attack. Watching another brother fall, Cao Hu desperately tries to deflect the projectiles while shouting in rage. The golden storm strikes the entire headyacht and destroys several buildings. Bandits scattered throughout the camp are hit from every direction. Cao Hu desperately spins his spear to block the endless barrage. When he looks around, he nearly loses his breath after realizing that almost all of his men have already been eliminated. Overcome with rage, his eyes turn red as he demands that Yixuan stop. Chao Hu releases a monstrous aura and roars with all his strength. He then bursts forward and attacks Ye Xuan with a fatal thrust. Ye Xuan uses the bow itself to block the spear, sending sparks flying from the collision. At that moment, he realizes that Chao Hu's strength has increased to nearly the 9th level thanks to a secret technique. Ye Xuan flips backward and avoids the horizontal slash carried by the red aura. Retreating to a safe distance, Ye Xuan concludes that Chao Hu probably received some ancient inheritance to obtain this much strength. This also makes him wonder whether that inheritance is the real reason Lu insisted so much on taking this mission. As more bandits advance, Ye Xuan doubts anyone would care so much about a mission for only the official reward. Drawing his sword with a cold gaze, he decides to finish the battle quickly. With a circular motion, Ye Xuan releases a golden slash that cuts through the bandits charging toward him. He then opens the system and spends 44 devouring points on the blazing flame vigor technique. The 7th level ability temporarily burns his vitality in exchange for an enormous increase in power. With flames surrounding his body, Ye Xuan feels his combat strength rise close to the intermediate stage of the 9th level. The last remaining bandits gather together and desperately charge at him. Ye Xuan simply watches them approach with complete composure. Even while surrounded by dozens of enemies, he remains calm in the center of the battlefield. Chao Hu and his men shout for revenge, willing to risk everything to take him down with them. Hearing this, Ye Xuan flashes a dark smile. Gripping his sword firmly, he says he can grant their wish. A terrifying amount of golden energy explodes around his body as he sends them all straight to hell. The flash illuminates the entire mountain and sweeps through what remains of the camp. High on the cliff, the blonde disciple trembles after realizing that Ye Xuan practically destroyed the entire bandit group by himself. Lu maintains a subtle smile and comments that the young man really does deserve the vice leader's attention. Relieved, Guan Yulan says there are no doubts left and suggests that they head down. Among the ruins, the bloodied arm of one of the fallen bandits marks the end of the Blackwater Mountain group. Using the tip of his sword, Ye Xuan begins carving a message into a nearby rock. The inscription declares that Ye Xuan of the Broken Cloud sect was responsible for exterminating the bandits. Still alive and covered in blood, Chao Hu angrily spits out that all this talk about justice is a lie and that they only came for the spiritual beast at Blackwater Lake. The moment he hears about a spiritual beast, Ye Xuan immediately turns toward him. Before Chao Hu can say anything else, a flaming blade descends from above and cuts off his head. Lu appears with his sword covered in flames and asks, pretending to be concerned, whether Ye Xuan is injured. Ye Xuan looks at the senior brother suspiciously and immediately realizes that the timing was far too convenient. As his aura becomes heavier, he directly asks why Lu killed Hu at that exact moment. Lu hesitates briefly as a shadow passes over his expression. He then smiles and says he thought the bandit might attack Ye Xuan from behind. Ye Xuan responds sarcastically and demands a better explanation. Pretending not to understand, Lu asks what kind of explanation he wants. Without beating around the bush, Ye Xuan asks about the spiritual beast Chao Hu mentioned. Lu falls silent for a moment after realizing he can no longer hide the matter. Finally, he admits that a powerful beast called the Blackwater Jiao Dragon lives in the mountains. Irritated, Ye Xuan complains that all the noise from the battle could have attracted the creature. He directly asks whether Lu is trying to bury him alive on that mountain. Embarrassed, Lu tries to blame Ye Xuan for charging in alone and also tells Ning to stay quiet. Ye Xuan simply laughs at the poorly constructed excuse. Lu then admits that he should have warned him earlier, but assures him that the Jiao Dragon is weakened after laying its eggs. Ye Xuan asks whether that weakness is exactly what he intends to rely on to hunt the monster. Lu corrects him with a smile. The hunt will not be his alone, but all 4 of theirs. Ye Xuan looks surprised as he finally understands the proposal. Lu explains that the dragon guards eggs whose value could exceed 10 billion silver coins. Thinking about that absurd fortune, Ye Xuan agrees to participate. Even so, he insists that they finish the bandit mission first. Lu agrees and orders Ning and Guan Yulan to free the captured civilians, leaving all the camp's loot to Ye Xuan. Before leaving, he says they will meet later at the shore of Blackwater Lake. As soon as he is alone, Ye Xuan flashes a huge smile and heads straight toward the bandits' storage building. Night falls and the full moon begins illuminating the area. Among the ruins of the camp, one structure remains lit while Ye Xuan empties the vaults. Walking around happily, he thinks about the old saying that robbing thieves really is a quick way to become rich. The entire fortune the bandits accumulated over the years has now ended up in his hands. After devouring the herbs and rare resources he finds, Ye Xuan advances to the intermediate stage of the 8th level. Looking at the moon, he even thinks that perhaps he should exterminate bandits more often. Later, Blackwater Lake appears peaceful among the moonlit mountains. Walking through the forest, Ye Xuan finds Lu Ning and Guan Yulan gathered around a campfire. When Lu sees him arrive, he asks whether he already finished everything at the camp. Ye Xuan approaches and asks them to explain exactly how they plan to deal with the dragon. Lu gets up and tells the group to follow him, saying he will explain the details along the way. As they walk, he explains that months earlier, he heard rumors about a spiritual beast living in the lake. After interrogating one of the bandit leaders, he discovered that the Jiao Dragon was hiding weakened inside a deep cave. Ye Xuan finds the source of the information somewhat suspicious and asks whether that is really how Lu discovered everything. Guan Yulan asks him to trust their senior brother, saying Lu is always extremely careful. Lu confirms this and says he spent the entire last month investigating and preparing the operation. Soon afterward, he points toward a dark opening between the rocks and says the hideout is inside. He then hands out small bottles containing an ointment capable of hiding human scent. Everyone needs to apply it to their skin so the dragon will not notice their arrival. While applying the ointment to his face, Yixuan hears Lu ask whether anyone still has questions. The young man studies his senior brother for several seconds before asking what really matters. Yixuan wants to know why Lu is so obsessed with this hunt when his chances before Yixuan arrived were extremely low. To him, risking his life like this must have a much bigger reason behind it. Lu remains silent as his expression gradually becomes more serious. After taking a deep breath, he finally decides to reveal the reason. With a melancholic expression, he says he does not have much longer to live. Yixuan, Guanyulan, and Ning are surprised by the revelation. Lu explains that he has suffered from a rare illness since childhood, and that doctors said he would not live past 25. To survive, he needs the beast blood to practice a special technique, and he has less than 3 months before turning 25. Because of that, he says this is his final chance and that he needs to risk everything. Yixuan looks at the other two and asks why they also agreed to take such a huge risk. Ning explains that Lu's father saved his life in the past, and that the two of them grew up like brothers. Guanyulan adds that they are companions from the same sect, and that helping one another is only natural. Yixuan almost laughs at Guanyulan's innocence in believing such a convenient story. Ending the conversation, Lu points toward the cave and says it is time to go inside. The group silently advances through the cavern, illuminated only by the bluish glow of the crystals. At the front, Lu asks everyone to remain completely silent so they do not wake the monster. Deeper inside, smoke coming from the creature's nostrils reveals that it is sleeping. From a rocky ledge, the four finally see the enormous Jiao dragon curled around 2 glowing eggs. Peeking from behind a rock, Guanyulan quietly comments that the dragon is much uglier than she imagined. Trembling at the beast's size, Ning asks whether they really need to kill that thing. Lu keeps his eyes on the objective and confirms that they do. Still frightened, Ning grabs his sleeve and asks whether they can really defeat a creature that large. Lu smiles and assures him that he has already prepared a plan since the last time he was there. He takes out a bottle of poison and explains that the substance will greatly weaken the Jiao dragon. He then points toward a ledge above the nest and tells Ning to climb up there and pour the liquid down. Holding the bottle with trembling hands, Ning clearly dislikes the idea of getting so close to the monster. Lu places a hand on his shoulder and promises there will be no danger because everyone will attack as soon as the poison takes effect. Yixuan silently watches all the preparations, paying attention to every detail. With no other option, Ning begins carefully crawling along the edge of the rock. Soon afterward, he manages to position himself directly above the sleeping dragon. High above, Ning stares at the bottle with his entire body frozen from nervousness. When he tries to open it, his hands shake so badly that the bottle slips free. The container falls directly toward the Jiao dragon. Lu loses his temper when he sees the mistake and begins cursing Ning. Before the container can hit the ground, he fires a beam of energy. The attack shatters the bottle in midair and sends the greenish liquid splashing everywhere. The poison falls directly across the dragon's face and scales. Feeling the burning sensation, one enormous yellow eye opens. Furious at being awakened, the Jiao dragon unleashes a roar that makes the entire cave tremble. The creature rises and locks its eyes on Ning. Trapped high on the rock, the young man freezes completely. The dragon raises one of its claws and tries to crush him. Before the impact, golden beams strike the creature's claw and knock the attack aside. The monster turns furiously and slams its tail against the rock while Guanyulan joins the fight. The young woman faces the beast and begins gathering energy. A massive sphere of water forms between her hands. Guanyulan fires several blasts at the dragon, causing the creature to roar from the impacts. The monster responds by slamming its tail against the ground and breaking the stone structure. Consumed by rage, it begins attacking everything around it. Yixuan appears above and fires a barrage of golden arrows. The projectiles explode against the Jiao dragon's dark scales. After landing, Yixuan notices the green poisonous vapor spreading throughout the cave. The system detects the toxin, and the bloodline of 100 flowers automatically begins purifying his body. Watching the acidic liquid bubble across the stones, he realizes that he was also exposed to the substance. Annoyed, Yixuan complains that he ended up poisoned because of everyone else's incompetence. Meanwhile, the dragon continues reacting to their combined attacks. Guanyulan realizes that its scales are far too durable and asks Lu what they should do. Attacking with flames, Lu tells her to hold on a little longer and promises that the poison will soon weaken it. At that moment, the dragon's tail strikes the cliff where Ning is standing. The young man is sent flying into the nest and lands directly on one of the eggs, breaking it. Everyone freezes when they realize what just happened. The shattered egg splits open across the rocks. Lu panics and shouts in rage at the disaster. Realizing that it has lost its offspring, the Jiao dragon unleashes an even more terrifying roar. Yixuan immediately realizes that the beast has entered a state of complete fury. A massive wave of blue energy explodes from the monster's body and sends Guanyulan flying away. Right afterward, the creature charges directly toward Ning. Unable to escape, the disciple is killed by the dragon's attack. Taking advantage of the distracted beast, Yixuan runs along the walls of the cavern. He pulls the bowstring back as far as possible and gathers a powerful golden arrow. His eyes glow as he locks onto a vulnerable point on the creature. Yixuan releases the string and fires all the accumulated energy. The arrow pierces through the Jiao dragon's throat and opens a severe wound. Seeing the hit, Lu praises Yixuan with a smile that is difficult to interpret. Wounded, the creature leaps toward the young man with its jaws open. Lu shouts that he will help and also joins the battle. He jumps over the weakened beast. Gathering blue energy around his blade, he grips the weapon with both hands. Lu drives the spiritual sword deep into the dragon's neck. Riding on top of the creature, he drags the blade along its back as it loses strength. Freezing energy spreads across the monster's body until it becomes a massive block of ice. Yexuan watches everything suspiciously while Guan Yulin can barely catch her breath. When the frozen body hits the ground, the ice begins to crack. It shatters into several pieces, confirming the Jiao dragon's death. Relieved, Guan Yulin sits on the ground to recover her strength. Yexuan helps her stand and asks whether she is alright. Looking at Lu's weapon, Guan Yulin realizes that he used a lower-grade spiritual artifact. Lu stores the blade and explains that only a spiritual weapon could pierce scales of that level. Guan Yulin praises his preparation and is pleased that everything worked out. Yexuan interrupts the conversation and coldly asks where the antidote is. Guan Yulin looks at him in confusion. Lu's expression changes and a sinister smile appears on his face when he realizes Yexuan noticed the trap. He admits that he brought no antidote at all and asks what the young man plans to do about it. Yexuan asks whether the plan was always to kill everyone else from the very beginning. Lu replies that he does not only intend to kill him but also use his blood. With greed filling his eyes, he makes it clear that he does not intend to leave anything behind. Guan Yulin is horrified and asks how he can betray his own fellow sect members. Lu laughs at her innocence for still believing in that kind of camaraderie. The girl tries to respond, but intense pain suddenly spreads through her body. Guan Yulin bends over and coughs up blood as the poison spreads through her veins. Lu watches her suffer without showing the slightest concern. Taking out a ritual dagger, he celebrates that the moment he has been waiting for has finally arrived. For the first time, it becomes clear that the poison has already begun affecting everyone who entered the cave. Holding Guan Yulin in his arms, Yixuan asks how Lu managed to poison them without anyone noticing. Lu slowly approaches and mentions the Q concealment ointment as a clue. Yexuan immediately understands and asks whether the ointment was part of a two-stage poison. Lu smiles, satisfied by how quickly he figured it out. He reveals that he mixed confusion herb into the ointment, a substance harmless when used on its own. The problem is that when it comes into contact with another poison, it multiplies the toxicity tenfold. Yexuan finally understands why the system began purifying his body the moment the poison spread. Holding the beast's glowing core, Lu admires the prize with obvious ambition. He says that once his grandfather consumes it, he will finally be able to reach the true spirit realm. Beside Yixuan, Guan Yulin continues suffering from the toxin's effects. Lu even mocks her and asks whether it feels as though needles are piercing her dantian. Completely weakened, Guan Yulin looks at the traitor in horror. Unable to endure the pain, she eventually loses consciousness in Yexuan's arms. Only then does Lu notice something strange. Yexuan is still standing perfectly firm. What he does not know is that the bloodline of 100 flowers has already eliminated all the poison from the young man's body. Before the traitor can react, Yixuan charges forward and kicks him directly in the face. Lu is sent flying backward and coughs up blood in midair. His body crashes into the frozen rocks, scattering dust and shards of ice. Yexuan takes advantage of the opening and recovers the beast's core. Looking at his fallen opponent, he remarks that villains really do waste far too much time talking. Covered in blood, Lu cannot understand why the poison had no effect on him. Yexuan gathers golden energy and warns that someone like him does not deserve to keep living. Concentrating power into his fist, he prepares the finishing blow. Lu's eyes widen when he realizes he will not be able to escape. But suddenly a far greater force appears and blocks the attack. The shockwave forces Yuan several meters backward. With his guard raised, he watches the dust and tries to identify who just interfered. Lu immediately recognizes the newcomer as his own grandfather. Desperate, he begs the old man to kill everyone there and recover the beast core. Yexuan recognizes the man as Elder Lu, an influential figure in the Broken Cloud sect. But instead of continuing the fight, the elder grabs his grandson and tries to escape, warning that another creature is coming. The water inside the cave begins bubbling violently. Yexuan immediately realizes that there is a second Blackwater Jiao dragon in that place. With Guan Yulin unconscious in his arms, he understands that he cannot get involved in a direct fight. Yexuan hides behind an ice formation as a massive wave explodes from the water. A second colossal dragon emerges from the depths and begins destroying the cave. Hidden away, Yexuan confirms the new threat and thinks about the absurd mess caused by the Lu family. The creature charges fiercely across the rocks. It heads directly toward the nest and finds the destroyed eggs. Seeing the shattered shells makes it obvious why the monster is consumed by rage. Overwhelmed by the loss, the Jiao dragon unleashes a roar that echoes throughout the mountain. Completely out of control, it begins destroying everything around it. The creature leaps through the air, searching for any intruders still present. Its fangs and aura make it clear that it has no intention of letting anyone escape. Analyzing its strength, Yexuan realizes that the beast possesses power equivalent to the true spirit realm. Fighting it right now would practically be suicide. Seeing Elder Lu trying to escape, Yexuan begins thinking about how to use the situation to his advantage. He prepares an arrow and decides to block the main escape route. Meanwhile, Elder Lu runs toward the exit while carrying his injured grandson. His only goal is to reach the tunnel before the dragon catches him. Then he realizes what Yexuan is about to do. With the bow fully drawn, the young man gathers an enormous amount of energy. The golden arrow strikes the entrance directly and causes a massive explosion. The tunnel collapses, trapping Elder Lu inside the cave. Furious, he shouts at Yexuan without realizing that the dragon is already right on top of him. Before he can escape, the creature strikes him with a fatal blow. Facing his end, the old man realizes that all his plans are over. From a distance, Ye Xuan watches the scene without any intention of helping him. The structure continues collapsing as more debris blocks the entrance. The Jia dragon remains enraged, destroying everything it finds. Amid the dust and falling rocks, Ye Xuan keeps his balance and searches for an exit. He holds Guan Yulin firmly and realizes that her condition is still getting worse. If he does not get her out soon, the poison could cause even more serious damage. Ye Xuan then races toward the only remaining escape route. Carrying Guan Yulin, he jumps directly into the deep water. In the freezing depths, he keeps the girl protected against his chest while swimming with the current. Above them, the dragon continues roaring, unable to follow the two underwater. To endure the long swim, Ye Xuan opens the system and purchases an aquatic beast bloodline. The ability costs 230 devouring points and is assimilated immediately. Later, the current empties into a silent forest beneath the full moon. Several bubbles begin appearing on the surface. Ye Xuan emerges from the water carrying Guan Yulin safely. Catching his breath, he admits that they barely escaped and that the new bloodline was essential. Since they are still too close to the lake, he decides to keep moving before resting. With Guan Yulin in his arms, he quickly crosses the forest. After traveling some distance, he finds an isolated place where they can stay without attracting attention. Ye Xuan lights a fire to warm the area. Lying near the flames, Guan Yulin begins deliriously tossing from the fever caused by the poison. Ye Xuan realizes that the toxin is still spreading and that his ordinary medicines might not be enough. He then remembers the bloodline of 100 flowers and concludes that his own blood may carry detoxifying properties. With no better option, he makes a small cut to try using his own blood as medicine. He brings his finger close to Guan Yulin's lips so she can drink a few drops. However, while unconscious, the girl is unable to swallow. Ye Xuan becomes frustrated when he realizes he needs to find another way quickly. Guan Yulin continues getting worse in front of him. With no other choice, Ye Xuan becomes extremely embarrassed when he thinks of the only solution he can come up with. He decides to transfer the blood directly to her through his mouth. Silently apologizing, he leans closer and transfers the blood to Guan Yulin. Feeling the liquid, the girl opens her eyes for a few moments through the fever. With her vision blurred, she can only see Ye Xuan's face extremely close to hers. He continues the treatment until he is sure she manages to swallow the blood. Soon afterward, Guan Yulin's breathing finally stabilizes and she falls asleep. Looking at her calmer expression, Ye Xuan realizes that the poison has been almost completely neutralized. Still embarrassed by the situation, he jokes to himself that at least all that blood serves some purpose. Then a powerful wave of dizziness hits him. Ye Xuan brings a hand to his head and realizes that he overdid it with the amount of blood he gave her. The night passes and sunlight begins appearing between the trees. When Guan Yulin wakes up, she finds Ye Xuan unconscious from exhaustion beside her. Her eyes widen in surprise when she realizes how close they are. When she tries to quickly move away, the two accidentally bump into each other and Ye Xuan wakes up. The sudden movement even startles the birds perched on the nearby branches. Extremely embarrassed, Guan Yulin apologizes while he tells her it is nothing. To ease the awkward atmosphere, Ye Xuan takes the blame for bumping into her. He then becomes serious and asks how she is feeling. Guan Yulin replies that she only feels a slight pain in her abdomen and has no energy, but the worst has already passed. Relieved, Ye Xuan hands her a bottle of elixir to speed up her recovery. Curious, she asks what is inside the bottle. As Guan Yulin drinks it, Ye Xuan explains that his 100 flowers do a rare medicine prepared from his own recipe. Feeling her strength return, she confirms that the medicine works extremely well. Looking around, Guan Yulin recognizes the 18 mountains of Lianyan and comments that they were lucky not to be attacked by beasts. Ye Xuan thinks that it was not exactly luck. He then shows her the glowing core of the spiritual beast that he managed to recover. Guan Yulin is shocked when she recognizes the item. Ye Xuan explains that the core's aura kept the demonic beasts away throughout the night. Laughing, he admits that it only worked because he forgot to store the object before passing out. Curious about everything she missed, Guan Yulin asks what happened after she lost consciousness. Ye Xuan explains that Lu tried to take advantage of the poison's effects but ended up being defeated. He then says that the situation became even more complicated inside the cave. He reveals that an elder appeared and that Lu directly called the man his grandfather. Guan Yulin realizes it was Elder Lu and asks how everything ended. Ye Xuan explains that he destroyed the cave exit and escaped through the water while the second Jiao dragon attacked the traders. He adds that he saw both of them being killed by the enraged creature. Guan Yulin laments the betrayal and cannot believe that a respected elder was involved in something like this. Ye Xuan concludes that Elder Lu was probably the true mastermind behind the plan, using his grandson to hunt the dragons and obtain their resources. What he still does not understand is why they needed the disciples' blood, suspecting that it may have been related to some forbidden technique. Guan Yulin becomes worried when she remembers that everyone left the sect together, but only the two of them will return. Brushing the dust from his clothes, Ye Xuan says he has already come up with the perfect story to explain everything when they return. Guan Yulin agrees with the plan and admits that it really is the best version for them to tell when they return. Ye Xuan suggests that she rest a little longer while he looks for something for them to eat. Worried, Yulin asks him to be careful, reminding him that they are still deep inside the mountains. Sometime later, the day passes peacefully throughout the mountain range. The smell of a bird roasting over the fire begins spreading through the camp. The two sit near the flames while Yi Xuan finishes preparing the meal. Once the meat is ready, he offers Guan Yulen a generous portion. The girl accepts with a smile and thanks him for taking care of her. Slightly embarrassed, she asks Yi Xuan to stop calling her senior sister and simply use her name, Yulen. The request catches Yi Xuan by surprise since it shows a much greater level of closeness between them. Feeling slightly awkward, he calls her Yulen, making the girl blush even more. To change the subject, Yi Xuan mentions the beast core and promises to compensate her with resources of equal value. Yulen immediately refuses. She reminds him that Yi Xuan risked his own life to save her and says she would never accept compensation for that. Feeling awkward about all the formality, Yi Xuan asks her not to treat the situation as if she owes him anything either. Internally, he even thinks that her gratitude is going a little too far. At that moment, a noise from the bushes interrupts their conversation. The two immediately become alert and look toward the sound. To their surprise, a small beast cub leaps out of the vegetation and goes straight for the roasted meat. Yulen is startled and pulls the skewer back when the animal tries to steal her food. The hungry little creature, however, manages to bite the meat and refuses to let go. Yulen raises the skewer, but the little animal remains hanging from it by its mouth. Ye Zhuan carefully studies the creature, trying to figure out what it is. Not wanting the animal to cause any more trouble, he decides to capture it. With a quick movement, he reaches out and grabs the cub in midair. Holding the little creature, Ye Zhuan jokingly comments on how brave it is to invade their camp just to steal food. Yulen immediately asks him not to hurt the little animal. Ye Zhuan stops and looks at her, unable to understand why she is so concerned. The girl carefully takes the cub into her arms while it continues devouring the meat as if nothing happened. Delighted, Yulen shows the creature to Ye Zhuan and asks whether he does not think it is adorable. Ye Zhuan simply stares at the two of them, clearly not sharing much of her enthusiasm. Seeing how much she likes the animal, he asks whether she seriously intends to keep it. Yua hugs the cub and excitedly confirms that she does. A moment later, however, she remembers that demonic beasts are usually extremely difficult to tame. Ye Zhuan smiles and says the problem is easy to solve. He opens the system and exchanges points for a special beast development pill. The purchase costs only 10 devouring points. Ye Zhuan takes out a small pouch containing greenish pills, immediately catching Yulen's curiosity. He explains that they are beast growth plan pills, capable of resetting the cub's memories and making it easier to tame. Without wasting any time, he brings one of the pills to the creature's mouth and makes it swallow. He then explains to Yulen that there is one more important effect. Once its memory is reset, the cub will consider the first person it sees to be part of its family. The little beast keeps its eyes closed while assimilating the pill's effects. A few moments later, it slowly begins opening its eyes. The first person it sees in front of it is Yulen. The girl celebrates when she realizes the cub looked directly at her. Immediately afterward, the little creature excitedly leaps toward her. The cub jumps into Yulen's arms, and she happily hugs it. Ye Xuan gives her the remaining pills and explains that they will help strengthen the beast's bloodline and make it increasingly loyal. Happy with the gift, Yulen asks him to choose a name for her new companion. Ye Xuan thinks for a few seconds and suggests calling it Whisper. Yulen repeats the name and immediately likes the choice. The peaceful moment ends when a voice comes from the vegetation, shouting that they finally found the wolf cub. Ye Xuan and Yulen immediately go on guard. Heavy footsteps surround the camp, revealing an entire group of cultivators. Their leader appears mockingly and asks who intends to save Ye Xuan this time. Among the men, Ye Xuan recognizes Zhang Shan, the same man whose arm he previously broke. Yulen also recognizes the man leading the group and worriedly says the name Fan Yu. Fan Yu greets her sarcastically and comments on how small the world is for them to meet there of all places. Ye Xuan steps forward and positions himself between Yulan and the enemies. Furious, Zhang Xiang points at him and demands revenge for his broken arm. Ye Xuan crosses his arms and sarcastically remarks that his recovery was surprisingly fast. Yulan moves closer and quietly warns that Fan Yu is a 9th-level cultivator of the martial path. She adds that the man is known for his cruelty and has already killed several disciples from rival sects. Even after hearing the warning, Ye Xuan remains completely calm. Fan Yu demands that he cut off his own arm as compensation if he wants to leave alive. Ye Xuan smiles and replies that if he wants his arm so badly, he will have to come take it himself. The provocation makes Fan Yu lose his patience and order his men to finish him. Under his command, several henchmen charge at Ye Xuan together. Without losing his composure, Ye Xuan asks Yulen to handle the weaker enemies while he takes on the 3 strongest opponents. With Whisper firmly perched on her head, Yulen agrees and joins the fight to help him.